p.m. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to have a crowd, something different. Tonight's December 5th, 2017. It's
Turn your
Tuesday
microphone
night.
on.
Yep, sorry. Thank you.
Do it all over.
This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. We'd like you to silence your phones, please. And we have our microphones on. We're good to go. And let's stand and join us in the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Randy, roll call, please.
Trustee LaRue?
Here.
Trustee Everson?
Here.
Trustee Wiegand?
Here.
Trustee Marks?
Present.
Treasurer Johnson?
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Staff present is Roger Zappa, our Township Attorney. Jason McCarthy is here. He's the Township Zoning Administrator. Isaac Peterson's here. He's the Township Planner. Our Township Manager, Randy Gerard, is here. And committee members, I see Mike Springer is here somewhere. I don't know if there's anyone else here, but
Dan.
And Dan, he's from the Recreation Committee. Dan had a meeting, and they're from Recreation. Mike's from Planning, Recreation, and Roads.
Todd Caruth.
Oh, and Todd's back there too. Todd Caruth from Recreation's here also.
Thank you. Since we have such a crowd, I will explain some of these things as we're going along. I'm not sure how long everyone's staying through the whole meeting or not, but I will give you some background. Public comment is next on the agenda. You have 3 minutes to speak. If you'd like to speak on a particular item, you can come to the podium and tell me, and then when we get to that item, you can get up and speak and have 3 minutes. We need your name and address, please. When we have public comment, the board has an opportunity after you speak to comment if they choose to. If you need information from staff, we can get that for you later. We do not do a debate or back and forth conversation. It's your time to speak. We don't interfere. And if we want to comment, then you don't interfere. So, and if, like I say, if we need to give you any information, we're absolutely will do that. So if anybody'd like to speak just on something, comments or whatever, you're welcome to come up to the podium.
Good evening. I'm Mike Springer. I live on Eagles Nest Road in the township. I'm also the chair of the rec committee, and that's why I'm here tonight. I've asked a lot of people to come here tonight, and there's a lot of people that responded to that call. And I've got a presentation to do, but it's going to take a lot longer than 3 minutes. But I feel what's important here tonight is to listen to what these people have to say. And a lot of these people I've asked to come here to support the US 41 underpass and the resolution that MDOT needs from the township. 2 weeks ago, this board made a decision that you were going to address that issue at this meeting. Unfortunately, I didn't find out about it until Sunday when I downloaded the packet for the board and realized that that decision wasn't on the agenda for tonight. But I'd already sent out a lot of information to people. Didn't want to get a hold of them, tell them not to come because their comments are important. So I'm just going to ask you to listen to what people have to say tonight. And at some time, would you, if you want the presentation that I have, Randy Matari has it keyed up. So.
How long is this, Mike?
You know how that goes then.
Well, I should have been told at least. Or if you'd had asked me that, or told me you were going to send the stuff out, I would have told you the agenda was changed.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What file is it, Mike?
It would be the most recent.
Okay.
Something about the board.
Yeah.
So I'd like to give these people an opportunity to speak.
Did anybody want to have anything to say? Sure, come on up.
Hi, I'm Kerry Gottlieb. I live in the city of Marquette. I do own some land on Eagles Nest now, down the road from Mike, but I'm speaking more as president of No Cayman on Trail Network. No Trail Network, NTN, is a trail organization. I'm sure you all know about it, but we've been around since about 2001. We have a physical presence here in Marquette Township with our trailhead right off of Forestville Road. With our ski trailhead there and a lot of single track here in Marquette Township and around the city of Marquette, and the events that we run under our umbrella of No Cayman on Trail Network, including the No Cayman on Ski Marathon, Ore to Shore, Marquette Marathon, and the Ultra Marathon, all which go through Marquette Township land. We have been able to generate about $800,000 a year budget for what started out as a small nonprofit. I'm not an economist, but I believe there's a multiplier effect of that about 6 or 7 times. So our budget, what we spend, brings into the community about $5 to $7 million. So I think I'm speaking with a little bit of the community behind me when I say we are really for this underpass. When Jason came to our board meeting about, I don't remember, about a year ago, he asked for any donation that we could supply. And we're a nonprofit, and we gave $10,000. We committed to a $10,000 amount to this underpass because we think it's important for the safety of the bikers in the area to get underneath the road, the safety of anybody else who would use it, such as runners, snowmobiles, even though I'm not a real snowmobiler myself. Also brings safety to the cars that are going over us, not killing us. We see this as a huge benefit to our local community, a large step forward for safety, and frankly, a large step forward for the economy of the area because we will be able to bring in more tourists and ideally even more people come live in our area. The more we have for No Cayman on Trail Network, the better it is for our community. I realize I didn't say that real well, but I really think this will help NTN and thus help Marquette Township. Questions?
Thank you.
Lyle Vanderscaff, 235 here on Woods Drive in Marquette Township. I'm here on kind of wearing 2 hats. First is as a township resident and parent. I live about a half mile away from where this proposed underpass would be, and I have 3 children, 2 7th graders and a freshman in high school that probably are biking 5 days a week during the summertime, and at least 2 days a week. My sons are heading over to the South Trails on their own and riding from our house, having to cross Highway 41 to get there, oftentimes riding with their friends, so a group of kids. Right now they do it at the light at Brickyard typically. Sometimes they will use the tunnel under there as kind of their adventure route. But we do multiple times a week have young kids crossing the highway on their bikes, and certainly this underpass would be a much safer route for them. I feel pretty comfortable with them. I know my wife would feel a lot more comfortable if we were driving them just from the safety standpoint, but this tunnel would alleviate a lot of our safety concerns for them to get not only to the trails but anywhere else. If they're riding to a friend's house in town or on the other side of the highway, we would really feel better if there was that highway there for the safety. And I'm also talking here as a NTN board member, kind of going to elaborate even a little bit more about what Carrie was talking about. I'm directly involved with 2 events that would use this tunnel tomorrow if it was built. I founded the Marquette Trails Festival, which is an event that has about 600 participants in June, and one of our events starts at the Forestville Trailhead, and the race goes to the South Trailhead where the finish is. The first year we did it, we used the underpass under the highway, just the drainage tunnel under the highway with MDOT's permission. We decided that for our event that was not a route that we wanted to continue doing, so we had to find an alternate route. And we definitely hear from participants that they preferred the original route, and I think our event has suffered because we don't have that access. I'm also on the race committee for the Margie Gessick. That race is only 2 years old. It's already bringing about 600 people to town. The whole point of that race is it's a long distance adventure race that's using trails, Marquette Township, City of Marquette, going all the way up to the west end. So we are linking the trail networks together, and that's the basic attraction of the event is its distance and its ability to link all these trail systems together. And like the Trails Festival did, they have been using the underpass with MDOT's permission, but now Burger King has gone in there. We're really concerned about the different landowners and continuing access to there. And this last summer, just working on the event, we were, in the few weeks before the event, not even sure how we were going to get through to make that connection. And again, this is a race that has people coming from all over the country in just its second year. It's really getting a reputation for a fabulous event. There's a lot of excitement about it, and its potential existence going forward might depend on whether or not there's this tunnel here, because just the routes that we have, if there's a growing number of people here with increasing blocking off of different routes to get through there, that event either will have to completely change its route or come up with a different format. And I would hate to see that happen, because it's already been very successful. It's bringing people in town, filling hotel rooms, and also supporting the trail networks, and just making what we do happen. So again, I really feel strongly that this tunnel would be a huge benefit to the trail community.
Thank you, Lyle.
Hello, my name's Michael Sauer. I'm also a Marquette Township resident, 2373 West Fair Avenue. And like Carrie and Lyle, I'm also an NTN board member or treasurer for that organization, but also a resident of the township, so again, wearing two hats. One of the things that I have the opportunity of that's a little different, we've talked about the tourism. I want to talk about the tax base and professionals that are coming to Marquette Township because of the trail asset that we have here. I own Hiawatha Home Inspections. It's a small business that does consultations for people that are purchasing homes, new people. So I have the opportunity of meeting young professionals that are new to the area, moving to Marquette, and having the opportunity to hear what brought them here, besides for the opportunity for a career with millennials and young professionals. They're more and more mobile and have the opportunity to live in a place like Marquette and also be at their chosen profession. And you'd be surprised at how many times I've heard just talking with people that they'd made a decision to move here and to purchase a home because of the trail assets. One of the key issues we've had with the No Cayman On is linking the trail assets in the southern part south of Marquette and the trail asset that's up in Forestville. Carrie had mentioned that we have a trailhead up there. One of the things that the No Cayman On just entered with was a strategic partnership with Northern Michigan University. Northern really markets the surrounding area to bring students in and the opportunities that they have. And the No Cayman On's going to help Northern with Northern Michigan University students having that opportunity to get out on trails. And we know that NMU's had issues with safe crossings on Wright Street, and we, as a trail organization, have a safety issue on the US 41 corridor. So I'd ask you to think about this, to think about the economic benefit. A lot of the pain points that are on the US 41 corridor maybe were because of deferred planning. We just didn't have an eye on the future like we do now. We see the growth that's occurring there. So this is an opportunity for foresight to get in front of something, and I really would ask your consideration in making this happen. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to connect this and to take Marquette to the next level. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, I'm Peter Zanny, Werner Street along Badger Creek, Marquette Township, 2002. Thank you for being here and serving. I look on it as a health issue for our community. We've been very looking ahead in terms of having pathways for cars. Perhaps you might look at this as a retrofit, that we have this 41 corridor, which is dangerous for Lyle's children, others' children, to communicate. We have a fantastic trail system in South Marquette. I've built the trail system in North Marquette. I volunteer for the Quayman and Trail Network. But as a retired physician, I know full well not only what attracts people here, like Mike Sauer said, but what keeps people healthy. And I think that anything that you can do to support using our recreation, our beautiful nature, is money in the bank. People that spend time on trails have lower blood pressures, lower cholesterols, healthier mental health from being out in nature. And so I would look at this as an investment of the wellness of the future of our kids, and really appreciate any support you might do in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Lori Wiesen, 430 Brickyard Road. My husband and Doug and I have lived at that location for 20 years. We have seen exponential growth in that area, much to our dismay in some way. We have a little hobby farm. However, it is what it is, and I'm embracing the fact that you will have the foresight to invest in this underpass. I never thought that the township would grow so quickly and encroach on my property as quickly as it did. You have a rare opportunity to take the monies that are available and leverage them. The investment the township would have to make is rather minimal, although I don't know your budget intimately, but I think it's worth taking the risk because the future is going to involve the No Cayman on Trail Network and other non-motorized type opportunities for people. I work up at the trailhead quite frequently, both in the summer and in the winter. And what I have noticed by being there is I meet a lot of really nice folks, and generally will ask them where they're from originally and why they're here. And surprisingly, people are seeking out Marquette for retirement homes and being able to enjoy the natural resources that we have. And I don't know their addresses. I don't know if they're paying taxes in the township, but I do know that I'm paying a lot of taxes in the township, and I really hope that you will consider this underpass. 430 Brickyard Road is probably about maybe 3,000 feet from where this underpass would go. I'm not sure that I will ever use it particularly. I'm not a biker, but we do see the potential to connect the whole town to make that a real intersection for non-motorized foot traffic, the snowmobile. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. Doug and I have watched with great chagrin the near misses crossing that highway with snowmobiles. It's very scary. I ride the gauntlet every day, multiple times a day. And particularly in the wintertime, as these folks are trying to, they're not from around here, many of them. They don't really get it. They have, 5-6 lanes to watch back and forth from a gas station. And it is really scary. I'm surprised that more people have not met their maker. But I really support the underpass notion, and I hope that you will see fit to take township money to leverage against the other monies that are available. Thanks.
Thanks, Lori.
Joe Shedder, 220 Chapel Ridge, father of 2 young daughters. We've heard enough people talk about the trail and the importance for safety. Brings a great point with the hours from the Sheriff's Department. If we're a growing township and we're still concerned about growing safety of people, I'm for the underpass. I'm also here to say I'm supportive of the Sheriff's Department keeping the hours. There's talk of there being less calls, less need. I question that. If we have more people in town than we've had before in a township, we're growing, we have recreation people here, there's a presence factor that comes to my mind. Community policing is talked about. What do you want in a sense when something happens? You want extra patrolmen, whether it's 24 hours or 16 hours, instead of cutting patrol. We're all here, we're talking about safety of kids, bikers, everything else. The extra brown car that you see drive by might keep a tourist from doing something otherwise they would have thought of. Completely for the underpass, for the people using it, but more so I really want to consider the time with the Sheriff's Department, or however you decide to do for the policing.
Thank you, Joe.
Hi,
I'm Laura McDonald. I live on the other end of this trail, up in Negaunee Township at 136 Hardwood Lane. And I am the board president for a group called Start the Cycle Bike Group. And we work hand in hand with the 906 Adventure Team, who is currently working very hard to train our young people to ride our trail system. We train kids between the age of 9 and 19 to ride the Orta Shore bike race every year, and we give them all a bike when they're done. So I can tell you, I'm dedicated to giving 20 kids a year a new bike. And we have been concerned about the safety crossing. We're really pushing for these kids to get out there on their bikes. A lot of these kids won't have the opportunity to have vehicles. So we tell them this is a way they can get from Negaunee to NMU. They can take the Heritage Trail. If we had that underpass, they could get right to NMU. They could get to the places they need to go, the alternative school. A lot of these kids go to school there. They could be biking back to their homes across the highway. So I'm hoping you'll take it into consideration, and I do also support the Sheriff's Department keeping their hours. I think it's a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marquette County Sheriff Greg Zybert. I was just wondering if I need to reserve time to speak on the budget item, the sheriff's contract.
Actually, I was going to amend the budget, Sheriff, to put you under Board Education and Privilege Comment, which is number 7.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We weren't sure if you were coming. I probably should have put you on as a placeholder, but.
Hi, my name's Sven Gonstead. I live in Powell Township, 8267 County Road 550. I'm a member of the Cayman Trail Network board, and I'm also a member of the Powell Township Parks and Rec board, and I'm director of the Big Bay Pathway up in Powell Township. I recently submitted a letter to Mr. McCarthy, and I just want to read it to you for public comment. As soon as I find it here. All right.
You can pick that mic up if it helps it.
Oh, thanks. Oh.
Everyone on our top.
All right. You'd think I would know that, but
That's okay.
Anyway, as a board member of the Cayman Trail Network and Powell Township Parks and Recreation Board, I'm writing to extend my support for the U.S. Highway Underpass project. It would bring an unquestionably safe crossing for both trail users and motorists alike. As we all know, the density of traffic on Highway 41 has been steadily increasing through the years and will continue to do so into the future. Poor visibility conditions inherent to the Upper Peninsula, coupled with increased traffic, will result in an unsafe situation. The fact that it could someday connect trail systems on both sides of the highway would compound the effort to make Marquette County a top destination by providing a safe and aesthetically pleasing passage for active tourists. The potential exists for it to be one of the cornerstones of Marquette County's trail portfolio. While the proposed underpass would continue to place Marquette Township as one of the hubs of motorized and non-motorized trails, it would also serve surrounding communities that are in need, such as Powell Township. So that's pretty much it. It says how I feel, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ben.
Dan Adamini, 50 White Oak Drive. I want to make the assumption that everybody on the board understands the value. All the things that have been mentioned. I haven't heard the safe routes to school, which certainly is something that I know the board has been involved with. And in addition to the safe undercrossing for the recreational bikers, I live in Oak Hill Estates, and when my kids were young, it would have been great if we had something like this, because I couldn't let my kids ride their bikes from where I live to the mall, for instance. So I'm going to make the assumption that you all understand the amazing value of the underpass, and that if there's people who have concerns, that it might be the cost. But I do want everybody to remember that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. If this passes us by, this isn't something that we can do again in a couple of years. I mean, this is an opportunity that's here now, and most of us may not be here by the time an opportunity like that comes again. So I'd like you to really take that seriously. And how short-sighted a no vote would be, or at least if it's a no vote, you've got a very good, valid reason that you could articulate, because we applaud the effort to not waste money. But this is an investment that certainly will pay dividends, for generations to come. So I'm taking it for granted that you understand all the wonderful things that this underpass represents that are being spoken and will probably continue to hear. All of that's true.
But if there's a reason that you have concerns about it, I certainly hope that you can articulate them, because so far I haven't really seen detailed reasons of why we might be against funding this. It's an amazing opportunity with limited resources required by the township, so I certainly think I stand in support of this underpass, and I certainly hope you all do, but if you don't, that you can certainly articulate to the people why you would be opposed.
Thanks, Dan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Donna Reif. I live at 54 Midway Drive in Negaunee Township. I'm basically here on behalf of Marquette Township, a major local retailer in Marquette Township, Walmart. I'm here to support the hours in the budget allotted for the Sheriff's Department. I've been with Walmart for 21 years, 13 of those years being spent here at the Marquette Walmart, and out of those 13 years, I have been in loss prevention for 8 years. I'm here to support the local law enforcement that I utilize for my business, for our local retailers as well, for the amount of hours allotted to be able to access the Sheriff's Department when in need. And also, we have a great rapport with the Sheriff's Department when it comes to the fact that they need us as well. So when we get to that part of your agenda tonight, I want you to know that I'm here to support the hours for the Sheriff's Department on behalf of Walmart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not Sven. I'm Elizabeth Bates, 208 Eagles Nest Road. I'm one of those retirees people mention occasionally, and my husband and I did come to Marquette because of all of the outdoor recreational opportunities. And when we have things like the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, come on, all downhill. I can do it. But I think to have this underpass and not worry about Highway 41, you know, having to cross that for any reason, as a retiree, I think I'm slowing down and it's getting harder to cross. But I think more importantly, as we have lived here and we've been coming up since 2001, what I see is I'm quite amazed at all of the attention Marquette is getting as a recreational magnet. I mean, we have the No Cayman, we have all of the bike races, and what I imagine is that all of these people coming up, you know, no matter which of these races, especially if they're bikers, you know what? If they can take half of a day, if they can take a full day to just not be in a race but just appreciate our trails, this is just further reason for them to come, to stay a day longer, 2 days longer. And I think that this underpass is just fantastic in terms of being one more part of a huge draw for people to put Marquette, you know, on their itinerary and maybe stay a little bit longer, because once the race is over, there just are so many other things to do. They might even retire here. Who knows? So I definitely think this is well worth any money spent. I think all that money is going to be coming back to us, and probably soon. I mean, you know, not in 10 years, but I think it's going to be coming back within a year, 2 years. So I really hope you vote yes on the underpass. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ann Jackson, and I live at 230 Huron Woods Drive, just not too far from here. Not much of a speaker, so I'm a little bit nervous, and I just jotted some notes down. Like everyone has talked about, is the safety, and this is for not just bikers, but for the runners, for the snowmobiles, and especially for our big growing population of youth. Another thing that we've touched base on is the money that Marquette Township is going to make. And Marquette Township is vast. It doesn't, you know, it's not just here. It connects that way towards Big Bay, you know, everywhere. And I just see this bringing in more money for you guys with better competitions. People that are going to spend a lot of money for a race. they're not going to do a competition if the course, it's not going to draw in the big guys, the big guns, if the course is not up to their standards. You know, we have advertising, we've been advertised in magazines all over the United States, websites. We have I picked someone up from the airport today. There's a 30-page article on Marquette. So I just think we need to live up to that standard, and because more and more people are coming here, there's more development, and I agree with all these people. So I love this area, but I do want it safe, and I love our sheriffs and all the people working for them, and I totally support them.
Thanks, Ann.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kathy Leone. I live at 240 Chapel Ridge Road, and my husband Tom is here as well. And so I really ditto all the comments that have been made here. Tom and I moved to the township in 2011. We lived in the city of Marquette. And one of the things that we really enjoyed about living in the city was that access to bike trails and to the stores was all very quick and easy, and you could access those by pedestrian, by walking, or by taking your bike, and you felt relatively safe. And moving out here to the township, I'm very appreciative of having close access to the Iron Ore Heritage Trail. We have nice amenities like Schwemmwood Park, some trails there, so I'm so appreciative of that. And I think that the township is headed in the right direction in terms of, I've seen some of the plans for adding more walkable sidewalks along the 41 corridor, which would allow us to do more commuting by non-motorized methods. So I think if we look at it from an environmental point too, is that if we can encourage people by having this underpass, that we could get from one side of 41 to the other safely, and to be able to access all of the retail and service stores by foot or by bike, that would be something that I see as a quality of life issue as a resident in the township. So I also think that I'm also an NTN member, and so there are a whole range of aspects of being able to access the trails for your health, being able to cross over 41 safely. Oftentimes my husband and I have biked across from Commerce Drive over to the 41 highway, and even though you have installed the crosswalk, it's still, there has been several occasions where there's a lot of rolling stops, and it's not quite as safe as I think we would want it for, as several have mentioned, for their kids and for safe crossing for all. So thank you for your time, and I hope that you really do consider this underpass and what a enhancement that would be to the township.
Thank you, Kathy. We got through everybody? You sure? Okay.
Hello, I'm Terry Govern, and I live on Brickyard Road. I am also in support of the underpass. My kids grew up on Brickyard Road. They were born there and lived there their whole lives, and now they're, unfortunately, if the underpass is put through, they probably won't use it because they're driving cars now. But when they were that age, they were not allowed to cross the highway. It just is completely out of the question for a young child to have to cross that highway, either walking or biking. So if they had friends over in Bishop Woods, or if they wanted to go somewhere, they either had to wait till we got home to drive them while we were away at, if we were working during the day, they weren't able to go anywhere because they can't walk and they can't take their bike across the highway. So I just think it would be a really good thing for all the youth on both sides of the highway. You have kids from that side of the highway that might want to be going to, either the trails or whatever else on this side of the highway. And then the kids that live on this side of the highway, there is not as much on this side of the highway like where we lived on Brickyard Road. Anything they wanted to do was on the other side of the highway, so they just weren't allowed to do any of those things. I think it would be a great benefit to the youth on this end of the township. And I'm also in favor of it for the snowmobiling as well, because like Lori Wiesen had said, you know, coming out of Brickyard Road, several years ago, the trail went, crossed at Brickyard Road. Now it's crossing at the gas station. But both places really are not a good, safe place for the snowmobilers to be crossing. And I'm not a very big snowmobile rider, but I have ridden snowmobiles a couple times from my home. And let me tell you, getting across that highway was very stressful. So I think especially, like Lori said, sometimes people aren't from here and they're not real familiar with the area, and they may not be expert snowmobilers either. So to cross 5 lanes of highway on a snowmobile is very difficult to do, and it's something that's just not easy and stressful. And it wasn't comfortable for me as a driver coming out of Brickyard Road when you have snowmobiles coming in both directions trying to cross. And the more businesses that we get in that corridor right there, just makes more cars pulling in and out all the time. It's going to be a disaster someday. Something bad's going to happen there. So I am also in support of the underpass. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
I'll be brief. Most of my points have been covered already. My name's Gail Hanna. I'm a resident of the city. And I also use the trails extensively, but I feel like that's been well covered. But in my professional life, I work with MDOT. I'm one of the implementing agencies for their Safe Routes to School program in Michigan. And I just want to say that I think the opportunity that they're offering us is huge, because MDOT doesn't spend money on things that they don't believe in. And if they are offering this money, I think really speaks to their commitment to making it safe for us. And I would love to see the township, because I agree, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gail.
Good evening. My name's Todd Caruth, and I live at 2522 Warner Street here in the township. I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm certainly in favor of the underpass. I've been excited about the underpass since I first heard about the opportunity. For this to take place, a lot of stars really had to align. First of all, we had to have MDOT working on the highway, or it wouldn't even be a possibility. And then a lot of grant money needs to be offered up, which has been offered up. You need local support, and you see tonight we have a tremendous amount of local support from the residents. Also the user groups. We got user groups that are here in support and excited about the underpass. So funding and support, really the last piece is the board. We need board support. And with that, we can move forward and get the underpass. We'll have the safe school routes. We'll have our connect the north and the south trails, which are such a great, important part of our community. So I'm just thrilled about this opportunity, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Hi there. Craig Thomas, 1802 Erie Avenue. A chiropractor here in the township, also resident, obviously, but not much else I can say that hasn't been said, but I think I could maybe represent the professionals that are moving here specifically for the potential of what we have. And I do a lot of mountain biking, cross-country skiing, and what we have here with this opportunity is just the potential to connect those trails. Usually I just kind of sit back and let things go in the direction they go to, but to see this opportunity come up, I feel like, I could probably just put my 2 cents in here and just say I really think this is a great idea, and I think it could bring a lot more people in that are into this type of lifestyle and love Marquette the way that I do. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I'd like to explain a couple things first. Some of the things that were said, and then we can have board member comment. This board and the Downtown Development Authority have been talking for quite a while about a safe crossing of US 41, and DDA is still working on that. We have some, if you want to get involved or come to some of those meetings, that might be very informational for you, or check our website as to what we're kind of thinking of working with MDOT on their next 2 projects. So I need to clarify something right away, that this board is not against the underpass by any means. We were not necessarily going to vote on whether to support it or not. That wasn't really the issue. The issue is the funding. When there are events in the community, races or businesses do well, we don't benefit from that financially. We get tax money or state funding in various different sorts. So while it's important that the township grows and is successful, that doesn't give us more money in our bank account unless there are more properties, more homes built, then we get the tax money. So our job is to have a successful community that we can pay for, okay, if that makes sense. We've struggled with this budget. This is my, I don't know, 8th, 9th year, I think, on the board, and this is the worst budget we've had. And it's a culmination of a few things. One, of course, is the tax tribunal. That's made a huge impact on our budget. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've had to pay back to these corporations. The second thing would be a lot of legislative issues, and we discovered that today. The manager came to me with a $3 million number this year in values of our properties in the township. That's a huge loss. That's very significant. That could be special business discounts that the legislature might be giving. It might be exemptions to veterans. It might be legislative tax sharing that we don't get anymore. And while some of that stuff is good, it still depletes our bank account. So our support or non-support from the beginning has been, number one, we're paying Jason to do this, so we're interested in whether this is a possibility. And he's done a phenomenal job in his department, and Isaac, into looking into how this is feasible. They've raised tons of money. I contributed. I don't know if anybody else does. It's not that we're not against it. We were afraid with such a tight budget to try to, if we sign this paper, we're committing to a couple $100,000 that if this money is not raised, we're on the hook. So we have to support the whole thing, not just if there's $5,000 left, we can maybe write them a check. And even at one point, I looked into some loan options in case there's money left over that we have to come up with and can't get any more donations. Can this board go out and get a low-cost loan for $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever? So it's not just does this board support it or do we vote for it. It's a little bit more involved, but it is focusing more on money than anything else. Out of 4,000 residents, if this is all that supports it, and I'm not saying they all need to come, but we have to base our decisions on the whole township. And again, that doesn't mean we wouldn't support it. Absolutely, this is a pie in the sky type thing. The stars did align. This is an opportunity. MDOT wants to do this and the DNR wants to do it. So it's not like we're not going to do it just because, like I said, this is not a vote. I think that's all I wanted to add. What I'd kind of like to do then is get board member comment in relation to your comment, unless, Jason, there's something that you would want or Isaac contribute before we commented, because
a quick update.
And maybe even a little, I don't want to say history, but give them an idea, because some of the things they were saying weren't quite, their information isn't quite
right.
how this evolved.
And I'll save that till tomorrow.
Okay.
But essentially, MDOT has a resolution that they need signed, and that puts the township on the hook. Not only for the underpass matching funds that we need, but also for the proposed roundabout lighting. We have had a couple of positive conversations this week with MDOT and our Act 51 agency, which is the County Road Commission. There are 2 funds that we will be tapping or attempting to tap for an 80 or 20% matching funds for the lighting themselves. So because we have unfortunately had some fatalities at both of these proposed roundabout intersections, there are safety funds available for that. And thankfully, because of the timing of this project, the County Road Commission is going to apply by the end of the week for these funds. So instead of paying $250,000, there's a potential for the township to only be on the hook for $50,000. We propose to have.
That's new. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And at the last meeting, the township was posed with this resolution, and they weren't comfortable voting on it. And we understood that because of the funding issue. It's about $125,000 on the tunnel and $250,000 for this lighting, all as a package deal. And what the board tasked Manager Gerard and myself with is to give us a couple weeks to go and find some more money, have some more conversations, and we've done that. However, MDOT's given us another 2 weeks. So they're stating that they don't need this resolution until the 19th, which is why it got pulled from the agenda tonight. That wasn't necessarily conveyed because we knew we were going to provide an update tonight anyway. We certainly appreciate you guys all coming out and speaking on this. I think it's very important for the board to hear that because there was some question about, how does this really play into the overall community? You don't want a tunnel to nowhere. You want it to go somewhere. And certainly there are a litany of opportunities to connect multiple trails. And one thing that wasn't touched on tonight that I will touch on is just the economic development component of it as well. You're securing essentially right-of-way green corridor space through developing commercial property, which is usually the other way around. Usually you're trying to beg those property owners for that property to get that kind of infrastructure in place. And in this case, we're putting it ahead of that in some vacant commercial property. So it's a huge win for us if we can pull it off. But there's pledge forms available tonight to anybody that's here if you haven't considered it. And I guess unless there's any questions, that's basically the update. But we're going to have another couple weeks to try to have some more conversations. We've reached out to the major trucking companies that will benefit from this project as well. You'll find out tomorrow night if you come, and hopefully you do, more specifics on that. But essentially coming north off of 492 and going westward on US 41, there's going to be a continuous right there. So that's going to reduce commute times for some of the larger trucking industry, logging, mining, etc. And they've used a term called de-risking, which is a huge component for them. So if they're able to find some benefit to their operation through a project that happens publicly, then perhaps they're able to contribute to that. And that's what we're looking forward to in the next couple weeks. So that's all I have for you.
Thanks, Jason. Okay. John, you want to go first?
I'm hopeful of the issue that's going to be before us, or was before us last meeting. It combined the tunnel and the 41 development. I'm hopeful that we can get that divided into two motions. And I think that it should be, if you are hopeful of getting it passed. I have no issue with any part of the lighting or the development of 4128. I think all of that is going to happen regardless of what this board does. And we will inherit with no control the payment for the lighting. If we okay that, you're going to pay for the lighting, you're going to pay for the maintenance that goes beyond what they accept as their responsibility. However, the tunnel itself, the position, the tunnel itself, and the length of the tunnel all indicate that if it's built, the township will be forced with a multiplicity of maintenance issues. That's going to be added to our budget. We're going to have to pay for the maintaining of that tunnel. And the reason for that is repeatedly, the gift givers here from the state have repeatedly told us, when the tunnel's built, you own it. That means it's going to be in our budget. So that's a consideration that this board has to make at the same time that they're considering the two resolutions that would need to be passed for this to be going ahead. So the public needs to understand that that's a commitment for tax dollars in the township for maintaining that tunnel. So while your arguments may be valid and people may think that that's worth it, they have to know up front, and it's our responsibility to share that with them, that that's going to be a part of our budget and we're going to have tax dollars to pay for it. And I think we have to accept that, and we have to share it with our taxpayers. And having just gone through a terrific cutting of a number of things that you're going to hear about eventually in the budget, things that people have been accustomed to having happen and enjoyed for years, they're not going to enjoy them forever because the budget is that tight, and we have to supply the needs that are there for the community that are required by law. And when you do that, you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room left. So we've gone through, this board has worked tirelessly to cut a number of things. Even the city of Marquette's going to be surprised at a couple things that have been cut. They've been cut because we have to do that. So making this pledge for future commitment to maintain the tunnel is a serious issue for us to resolve. And I share that with you because that's the honest part about this thing. You don't just get the tunnel, you get to maintain it and all that comes with it. And that's lighting, power supply, drainage, because this is, anyone that knows where it's going to go knows that there used to be a stream go through there. So we have some potential drainage and maybe maintaining of sump pumps. We don't know because we don't have the plans. But the point is, there's a number of things that come with it. It's not just a gift. You get with this a lot of obligations, and you can't avoid them. And that's the one part that we have an obligation to share with you folks and the people who aren't in this room. That's it.
Anybody else? Dave?
First, I'd like to say I was impressed by the showing tonight and of support, and I support the tunnel and the roundabouts. I think those that have been working on this, we've taken a $2.5 million tunnel project and we're down to $125,000 is what we need to finish it up. The township set out on this when we started on it some year ago to have a zero cost to the township budget. And I think we're very close to this. This resolution is one more step that puts us a year down the road to collect our $125,000 that we need to make this happen. And I would think by the support that we see here tonight, that's fairly realistic that that can happen. And I would hate to think that we're gonna sell those that have been working on it this long and those that have been supporting it this long. We're gonna sell them short for $125,000 out of $2.5 million. The same as the lighting and the roundabouts. It's just federal bureaucracy that says that if they put the roundabouts in, that the local municipalities is accountable for the lights and to power the lights and to take care of the plantings in the roundabout. That situation changes every day. The supervisor was surprised by a couple statements that the planner made tonight about some additional grants that he came up with and was made aware of today that can reduce that $250,000 significantly. And you got to remember that these projects are not going to take place for a year. That's how long we have to to whittle away at a potential $50,000 in the lighting program and $125,000 in a tunnel. And I think that is more than realistic to think that we're going to do that. I support it, and I hope when we get to it on the 19th that we can move it forward.
Thanks, Dave.
I'd like to say that how important it is for people to come to these meetings, because we sit up here, we make decisions with their money, either in a township or you're not in a township. Yes, they come, bring people to our township. They keep our businesses alive. But most important, it's hard to figure out exactly what we should do if we don't hear from you and you're here. Either you're here or you can write a letter to our manager or something like that. But in the future, the best thing you can do is be active and be attentive to what's going on. The manager the other day said that he's dealing with a budget dollars from 2008. It's about pretty much the same dollars as we're doing today. We're dealing with. So it is, like John said, it is important. But I am supportive of the lighting and also the underpass, because I think it saves lives. And to get people out of their homes, get away from their phones there, and do a little exercise. Maybe I should have started a little earlier, but I can't. But I am supportive of it. And the big thing is thank you for coming. It's very important.
Anybody else? Ernie?
I agree with a lot of stuff that's being said, and I thank everyone for coming and gives us another perspective in that. But the lighting, I'll start with that. When that started coming up, we had no idea that was going to come up at all. When the MDOT came with the roundabouts, I don't remember ever hearing anything about we're going to have to pay for lighting at all at that point in time. They came and made a presentation, and that was it. And then all of a sudden it went through, and all of a sudden we got a notice and a resolution that we're going to have to be on the hook for lighting and that. Being treasurer and watching the budget and that, when they're talking about $150,000, $250,000, there's no way the township had money for that, none whatsoever. And I can see the need for lighting there. As far as the roundabouts, if you have them, you have them. If you don't, you don't. To me, it doesn't make much difference one way or another. I could care less one way or another as far as that goes in that. But as far as cost-wise, I don't like the unknowns come up when we're have to be faced with a few $100,000. Now, we come up with maybe $50,000 now that we're going to have to be addressing that. Until we get it in writing, it's $50,000 sitting out there, and that we don't know for sure. So that's what I'm concerned with. MDOT presented something and did not present the whole story, and then we all of a sudden we have a $150,000 bill sitting in front of us, and not to do it, and that. And it's something that we're going to have to maintain, the lighting and everything else. That's my understanding. So it's something that's going to come out of your tax dollars, year in and year out. There's no question on that. The underpass, I can see good portions of that. I can look at the cost for that. As long as we can cover the costs, fine. That was my original discussion on it. I could not see us putting money into it like that. It just wasn't money in the budget. There still isn't money in the budget, and there won't be for a number of years unless something drastically changes in that. We've lost too much money in the last 10 years in that. Part of it is the dark stores and the tax tribunal was a big hit, $400,000 or more dollars, and that's continual. We've lost that. We'll never get it back in that. Most of you don't know that we get revenue sharing, constitutional revenue sharing from the state. We get that. There's also just plain revenue sharing. We don't get that because we don't have 7,800 people in our community. How many communities in the Upper Peninsula have 7,800 people? They all get it. Those that have 7,800. We don't. And that came right out of the governor's office when they laid it all out in that. So we've lost out the hundreds of thousands of dollars there. There's things like this here. As the supervisor said, there's other things that they've done as far as taxes. Personal property taxes, they took that away. We don't have that anymore. Whether it was right or not, I can't say that. But then you look at being a veteran, I have a good idea what that's all about when they talk about giving the tax breaks to veterans. That's fine. But the problem is the tax breaks that they give the veterans is great, but it's coming out of your pocket, not out of the state pockets. And if you look at the way the state does things, it doesn't affect their budget at all. It's all local. So anything they do from the state down there, that sounds good, it's all out of your local pockets and that. And that's the problem we're facing here and that. Things happen downstate and we have to try and absorb it, and it becomes very difficult at times. So I think both of them have very good positives. My concern as a board member is future costs for the future. If we can address that, fine, I can support it in that too. So.
Thanks. Dan, you want to add anything?
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'm one of the board members that I'm definitely on the fence with this whole thing. I'll talk about the underpass. I would certainly like to see it go. I can see the benefits of it, but we have to watch the tax dollars of all the people in the township. We're representing those people, so we're responsible for the tax dollars. If we can possibly make it go, Jason has all but guaranteed us that we can get that $125,000 back. He can't do that, but if I'm hoping something will come up in the next 2 weeks too, and I will vote for it. I said in the beginning when this came up that I couldn't support it if we had to go to the taxpayers and ask for, or have them pay for it. So if I'm hoping that you can get a little bit more input, people can put some money forward, we can reduce that, and I'll vote for it if indeed we can get this reduced. The lighting, like Ernie said, we were given that from MDOT, and we don't like it a bit, and hopefully we can get some money. And our budget, if you know what we've gone through in the past 2 months to try and get this budget resolved, we're pulling our hair out, and some of us don't have a lot. So
Thank you.
It's been tough, and it's my first year on the board. It's been a learning experience, certainly opened my eyes, and I like to see all the input from the people, and I like to have my vote represent the people. That's why you're here, and as long as we can afford it, that's what we're going to do. So.
I see one more thing.
Randy, do you want to say something?
You go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's not that we don't support the underpass. It's just that the finances are tight, and we'll see what we can do about that. That's why when I chatted with Jason last week, this again was supposed to be on tonight's agenda, but he said he'd had an extension for a couple of weeks. So as the agenda maker, I decided to put it on the 19th. So I'll give every opportunity for staff to get finances in order before we make a decision. So, I talked to a few residents. They're not against the underpass or the route. They're just worried about the money. Where's the money coming from? And that's what we're here to make a decision on. So that's where we're at.
Pete, did you want to add something?
There's one thing that we didn't bring up, and about the building of the township is on both sides of the highway now. The last number that I heard of was either 30 or 32,000 cars going by here every day. So that's quite a challenge to get across. So a lot of people don't know how many cars are going by there. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Randy, go ahead.
Well, just in case a lot of people are going to leave, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. For many years, the township board has been supportive of safe crossings of US 41. For several years, we fought with MDOT to acquire the crossing at Commerce. And the purpose of that was to provide a safe crossing. We diligently have pursued creating pathways, moving east and west, trying to be able to get people off of US 41, road connections to try and get people off of US 41 to minimize that traffic impact. But as you've heard from the board members previously, this year, 2018, was the target year of the main impact of all of the tax cuts that have occurred. Former supervisor and I have been informing the board right along that we'd be fine until we got to 2018, and that would be the push year, and that's where we are. What the board members have been referring to, and what Trustee LaRue spoke of earlier, our tax revenue this year is $98 more than it was in 2014. What's happened to the township since 2014 in terms of demand on the township government? That's what we're struggling with. That's why we're talking about the sheriff's contract, because there are only a few things that we can address that are not statutory requirements of the township to perform. Recreation and the additional law enforcement contract. Those are the only two items the board has that they have discretion in. We're not talking about eliminating the sheriff's contract. We're simply talking about reducing it to a point where we can afford to provide the contract. We literally had $7,000 excess revenue over expenditures this year. That's what the board's been dealing with. Yesterday we had a special meeting. The board cut from 8 different line items in the budget, additional funds, so we could continue to provide health insurance. That's how tight it is. The thing we're waiting on right now, and you might have been following it with the dark store issue, is the Menards and Escanaba case. It went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court referred it back to the tax tribunal for rehearing. That's going to determine what happens to us in 2019 and 20 in terms of revenues. So growth is continuing, but when you have 30% rate increases in electricity, and you have 30%, 32% increases in health insurance, and you have all kinds of other increases going on when revenues are sitting flat, what do? As a local government, in our general fund, we have to have reserve capacity. What happens if revenue sharing slows down and we don't get it? What happens if another dark store issue comes up and we have to refund 3 years of back taxes? That comes out of our general fund balance, which right now is sitting at less than 2 months of reserves. That's what we're dealing with. I'm not blaming dark stores at all. We never have. They were given an opportunity they capitalized on because that's their job, is to provide revenue back to their stockholders. That's their job. So we don't blame them. But at the same time, as has been mentioned previously, the state has continually reduced taxable values. They've either removed properties from the tax rolls, they've eliminated personal property tax revenues that we get, they've given preference to veterans, which we certainly support, but that comes right out of our bottom line. This year, our taxable value is $3 million less than it was last year because of those cuts. So that's what this board is dealing with, and that's why $125,000 becomes a big deal when you have $98 more than you had in 2014. So just so folks understand where we're at, very supportive of all of these things. Supportive of recreation, always have been. Lori, way back 15 years ago when you were on the rec committee. It hasn't changed. But it's getting difficult to do it, and that's why the board is trying to meet all these challenges without increasing millages to the residents. So I just wanted to get that out before everybody takes off after this meeting.
Oh, there's
over.
Dave.
Yeah. We'll see.
Just one more comment.
Quickly.
I'm adding to the manager's comments. Every financial advisor that we've ever had here comes in to tell us how we should be operating to financially fix the township in a positive position. They tell us, they recommend that we have 3 months of cushion.
4 months.
4 months in the general fund.
They say 4. They want us to have that kind of a cushion to operate successfully so that if there's a hiccup of any kind, we can accommodate it and go on operating and providing services to the town. So that's a big issue. We have, the manager says, what about $5,000 or something like that?
This budget cycle.
Yeah, we're down to very little. And 3 months, 4 months would be a welcome relief, but we don't have it. And that means you don't have it.
Okay. So.
But we're trying to get it.
Yeah.
Let's do the consent agenda. I need to read that, and then I've got a few additions to the agenda, too, which in one case we'll add the sheriff or privileged comment. So, the consent agenda tonight. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We really, really appreciate it.
You want to have a 2-minute recess?
No, let's read this. Okay, approval of regular meeting minutes of November 21st. Bills payable in the amount of $139,523.63. And we have a budget amendment, number 2017-10, that we will do roll call on this then. Received committee reports and other reports, including the Downtown Development Authority minutes of November 13th, which does talk about the underpass, by the way. Recreation Committee draft minutes of November 21st. The utility billing calendar for December, and I did not have a supervisor's report. Approval, let's see, okay. This looks different to me. So we need approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Support, okay. And that's a roll call then. You
Yeah,
wanna read the-
I'll comment on it before we do a roll call. The budget amendment is 2017-10, so that's the 10th one this year. The highlight of that budget amendment is authorized to request to increase revenue expenditures in the general fund and liquor law enforcement funds. The liquor revenue and transfer to the general fund are 25% over budget. The year-end vacation payouts for the manager and clerk's department are reflected in that. Law enforcement charges have been averaging 1.5% over the budget and are 11% over 2016 year-to-date. Street lighting has been averaging 12% over budget. Recreation Department has had more labor hours than originally budgeted, as well as higher sewer usage. The Assessor Department travel has been higher than planned due to the conference attendance and monthly MAA meetings. Building and grounds vehicles have had considerable work done in addition to operating costs. And tax tribunal expenditures have been 30% over what was originally budgeted. The offset will come from the fund balance. And that change is about $45,000.
I don't see that in here in the packet, Randy, so I don't know if it got missed.
The
What's
budget
that now?
amendment is in there, yes.
Yeah. I have it here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's 2B.
There.
I know it's in
Got it
here.
right there.
Okay, there it is. I went too fast, sorry. Thank you. Maybe it got missed, so we need a vote.
Clerk retires, yes. Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Trustee Everson?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
Supervisor Durant?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Next up is approval of the remainder of the agenda. So what I'd like to do, the public hearing, number 6, should actually have been separated. It did have a slash in it, but there are 2 separate items, so we'll have to open each separately. I just wanted to inform you. The township budget fiscal year 2018 will be one issue, and then the tax levy will be a second issue, just so you're aware. So I split that out on my agenda. And then for 7, we are going to talk about the DDA corridor lighting, and then the sheriff is here to talk about his contract or visit with us or ask questions. And then we need to add a closed session tonight, which I'm thinking number-wise would be number 8, right before board member comment. And do you need to read that now, Randy, or?
No, we'll read it when
we do it?
yeah.
Okay. So those are the changes I'm making.
Actually, the closed session should be after board member comment.
Okay. I wasn't sure exactly where it fit. Okay. Randy?
Actually, to save their sitting and waiting, the sheriff's comments could be under the public hearing for the
Yes.
budget.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's fine. That's the first part, right? The first one, not the
Correct.
second one.
It's the first public hearing.
Okay. Dave, did you have your?
Talking about the closed session on item 12 after board member comment?
Yes.
Yes.
So after 12.
You had said 8 there.
After 12.
12.
Yeah. Did I say 8? I meant 13. I'm sorry. Okay. So we'll move the sheriff to right, during the public hearing? Because that's what we do, is listen to comments at that point anyway. Okay, take that off. Right, I just need approval for that unless
The
somebody...
agenda presented as amended.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Just a question, where is the sheriff going to be at?
He'll be
First public
under the
hearing.
public hearing.
First public hearing.
First one.
Okay, okay.
We're at now.
We're just glad he's here, that's okay. And then Donna is gone. Or did you want to talk when we get to that part? Sure. Okay, I put your name next to it, I wasn't sure. Okay. Give us a second to get down there. Okay. So we will open the public hearing at 7:45
7:45.
to discuss the township budget fiscal year 2018. Sheriff, should we explain what we're doing first for the public, or did you want to make some comments first? Go ahead. Randy, you've got all the numbers on it. You'd be the best one to...
Well, first of all, the notice of public hearing was published in the Mining Journal as required by statute. It ran November 27th. Gave the statutorily required notice of this public hearing for December the 5th. You also have this evening, as part of the public hearing, when you get to the adoption, is the General Appropriations Act and the budget resolution that will be part of the actual budget adoption as you go forward, moving it to your meeting on the 19th. So the public hearing would also include that, as well as the tax levy coming up. Bottom line, short and sweet, basically, to get to the discussion with the sheriff's budget. The board did go through a number of budget work sessions, public sessions. I don't believe we had any public at any of the sessions from memory. But those sessions did culminate in a consensus budget that was adopted. The consensus budget contained a decision at that point as a consensus budget, certainly not an adopted budget at this point, to again reduce the sheriff's contract from its current 80 hours to 60 hours for 2018. The rationale for that was to take that savings, that 20% savings, roughly $48,000, $45,000 to $48,000, and put that into the general fund balance to get you a little closer to the 3-month reserve that has been talked about. Right now, you're just over 2 months. 2 months is $285,000. You are at $322 right after this budget amendment. So you're about $40,000 on your way to the 3rd month, which should be actually 3 months reserve with the current monthly spending would be $428,300.
But like you said, at some point, if we had a tribunal issue, we might have to pay out 100.
Well, as you recall, when the tribunal issue first came up and the first decision came out, we had to take $395,000 out of our fund balance as an immediate refund for the prior 3 years' tax collections to those entities. That's the kind of an issue that reserve is designed to protect us from.
So while it sounds like a lot of money, it could be gone in one
Well,
chunk.
that occurred in 2014 is when that first occurred, and we're just now back up to 2 months, a little over 2 months reserve.
Can you give us the history then with the sheriff's contract, please?
The sheriff's contract has been around for a long time. We've had a very good working relationship with several sheriffs. I think Greg is the 3rd sheriff that we've worked with, all the way back to Sheriff Mino, I believe. But at any event, the contract was originally established to provide additional coverage within the township. And at the time, the contract, it predates me. It was in place before I came here 15 years ago. But the contract was originally put in place when the township was beginning to develop. We were having some issues in the residential areas with, as it turned out, individuals from out of the area coming in and perpetrating break-ins and various other things going on. There was a need, desire to have additional protection, which culminated in sheriff's contract. I believe it was, I don't recall exactly what it was initially, but it has progressed up to 80 hours a week, and it has been there for a number of years. At one point, since I've been here, we did reduce it to 60 hours a week from a budgetary standpoint, but then the next year moved it back up to 80 hours a week. And just so the public understands, and so the sheriff understands, this was, and I did talk with Captain Kangas when we were going through the budget process to alert him that this may be something that might come up. It's purely a budgetary balancing issue. The decision that you had was either to reduce recreation, and the tunnel is obviously part of recreation, along with the other things that we do with our parks and other things, or the sheriff's contract. And the thought was that some of the issues that the board has been concerned about is increased enforcement along for traffic on US 41 corridor, and more time spent in patrolling in the residential areas as opposed to servicing some of the business needs. And that was part of the discussion, was to potentially go back to what the original intent of the contract was, and that was to have enforcement within the residential areas and on the roadways as opposed to supporting the commercial loss prevention areas.
So the operative word there is additional. The township already has sheriff coverage. We're not taking anything away from that. What we're doing is using tax dollars to pay for extra coverage.
Correct.
And that's what Randy was explaining. Back in the day, we needed additional coverage. We buy a vehicle, we have 2 full-time officers that work extra. And this board's argument is the loss prevention side of it. There are, what we're averaging out, and the sheriff can correct me, 20 hours roughly a week that goes to paperwork for loss prevention at some businesses. And that could be, you know, the euphemism is a stolen stick of gum is the extreme. But it's tying up the sheriff's time and all the deputies for what we're paying extra for, which is supposed to be the residents, the corridor, traffic tickets, whatever goes bump in the night, those kinds of things. We're paying extra. So this is extra money that's coming out of the budget. We don't have to do it at all. I mean, they do a great enough job without that, but this is something we want to do extra for the public. So that's what we are decreasing to the point of also having it more specialized for our residents and our visitors and the businesses. It's not totally taking the businesses out of the picture because they pay taxes even though it's not what some of them might have paid before. They're still paying taxes. They're entitled to that. But again, I have to stress that additional. And the contract is usually 1 year, I believe. It's been one
Annual
since I've been here.
contract.
It ends December 31st.
And again, this was not a simple decision for the board and the consensus, because there was consideration of many other things that were looked at during the budget work sessions. But ultimately, the decision of the board rested with what is in the best interest of the residents, which are basically paying the majority of the tax burden. And going forward, the 2 main areas, as I say, were recreation and the additional sheriff's contract that were basically attachable in this budget process. And primarily, the decision was to put the money back into the general fund balance. And again, you know, much of what goes on forward in 2018 and 2019 is going to hinge on when the tax tribunal takes up again the Menard and Escanaba case, and then what their determination is, their decision. If there is an improvement, and you know, the ladies here from Walmart, it won't impact them because they were the only ones that did not go to the tax tribunal, and certainly we thank them for that. They came in, sat down with us, went through their building plans, we reassessed their taxes based on their as-built, and they were satisfied with that. You know, so they are not part of the dark store, and I want to make sure that people realize that they are not part of that dark store issue. But again, it was not just that; it was all of the other tax impacts that have occurred, and you know, and the county's been hit with it too. And I'm sure the sheriff's department has already been probably dealt somewhat of bad news from the county board's budget. You know, and I hate to pick on them because we've been supporters of the sheriff's department for a long time, and I was even before when I was a board member, a county board member. But the issue comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, that's the bottom line. Not saying it'll stay that way. I mean, you know, going into the 2018 budget, if things turn around and the board has additional funds, and then things like the tunnel and going back to 80 hours are less of an issue.
As far as enforcement, we take it very seriously. We also contribute $1,000 to upset. That's another area of the law enforcement that's important to us as far as drugs are concerned. So we do take it very seriously, but we're just, where do you go?
Sheriff Seibert, do you want to make some comments?
Thank you for the opportunity to, basically, I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money, and I want you to know, I want to just straighten out maybe some falsehoods. I want to bring some statistics as to stuff that we are doing, and just give you basic information about what we do. I'm new with the Sheriff's Department. I'm learning as we go along, but I've been in law enforcement for 37 years. One of the things in Chalkley Township, people ask me why or how did you get to be one of the top 10 safe places in the state of Michigan. And I attribute that to our patrols. In Chalkley, we don't have the businesses you have here, so we didn't have the amount of calls and that type of thing, so I expected my officers to be seen. That means traffic stop. An average officer, I'd say, let's say in the city of Marquette or the county, on a night patrol or day is probably 10 to 13 stops. In Chalkley, if they're not taking calls, I expected them, and they would do, and they still do, between 25 and 35 stops a night. When you see that red bulb, you're not going to be going in that area to do crime. It has an effect. It's called the halo effect. The closer you are, and then it starts getting farther, farther, farther away. And I honestly, I can't prove it with stats and that, but I totally believe that just being seen on that 41 corridor and being seen in the businesses, that's what makes the difference of people. If they're going to do crime, they're going to think twice about doing it. I brought my captain and my lieutenant with me. They have some statistics, some stories, and that type of thing that I would like you to hear, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Captain Steve Kangas. First of all, I want to clarify that we are not a 24/7 patrol. We do come off the road at 2 o'clock in the morning, so we are not a 24/7 patrol. A couple of stats. I usually provide stats to the township monthly, and it's what the township asked for, but when this came up to cut down to 20 hours from the sheriff's office, I decided to take some stats from our 911 center. This year, from last year, we're up, this is just Marquette Township, we're up 250 calls in Marquette Township up through the end of November. Some of the stats that are up and some of them are down. Traffic-related accidents, or traffic-related, it was 41 corridor. Whether it's a car deer, H&R, rollover accident. 2016 we had 142. 2017 is 354 so far. Car accidents just in Marquette Township. This isn't Nagani, just Marquette. Animal complaints, 141 from 78. We're up to 141 animal complaints in Marquette Township. A big one is for residents that call for public peace or what we call suspicious situations, 911 calls. 2017 is 267 911 calls for a suspicious situation from the local residents, up from 170. 911 calls where someone calls and it's maybe they misdialed, but we still have to respond. Marquette Township residents, 240 for 2017. Destruction of property, larceny, B&Es, car windows, etc., things like that in the parks. 160 calls this year in Marquette Township. General assist just for the public, or well-being checks, or helping somebody out in the township that locked their keys in a car. We're up 215 to 237 calls this year. This year alone in 2017, if you don't count traffic stops, we're at 2,566 calls from Marquette Township residents or / business, but it's deriving from Marquette Township. If you add the traffic stops that we do in Marquette Township right now to this date, between our office and MSP, we're up to 876 traffic stops just on the corridor of Marquette Township because it's so busy. And that's trying to reduce the traffic accidents. Traffic accidents, like I said, we're 354 so far this year, and we haven't even started our December yet. And I think that's what I got. And then
address the
coverage. For the coverage for Marquette Township?
Well, what would happen when they cut down?
Yes, if you go from 80 to 60, that drops down to a half an officer. So you'll get 20 hours. Most likely it'll be on an afternoon shift from 4 to 2. Now, we're still responsible, and like I said, this is enhanced coverage is what we call it. You're paying for enhanced coverage. In Marquette County, we go by closest car concept. So with you having this enhanced coverage, this is what you're getting. You're getting close right now. You're getting that car because Marquette Township car never leaves Marquette Township. We never use them for Negaunee Township. We never use them for Ishpeming. If we drop down to 60 hours, we have to go by the closest car concept. So if it's a well-being check, yes, we will prioritize our call, but if our car is in Champion, they have to wait in line because we're just not here. And that's how we operate in Marquette County. The coverage of patrol cars is not, you see a lot because Marquette Township got their own enhanced coverage. So everybody thinks there's a lot of cars. There is not a lot of coverage in Marquette County itself. When we come off the road at 2, you only have one car working for the whole county. If that car goes to Elger, you have nobody. Afternoon shifts, I mean, we have shifts where we only have 3 cars out total, and maybe the state might have 2. So it's not like we have 7, I'm hearing we have 7 cars from the county and 8 cars from the state. We got 15 cars from 4 o'clock till 2 o'clock. That's not the case. That's not what our coverage is.
Usually some of those, both the state and the county, are dedicated cars. They're cars that are required to get all the paperwork in. So you'll see cars around the courthouse and everyone thinks there's all these police. They have to do their court work. They go from the west end, they do and then they're in Marquette Township. That's one dedicated car. Another one, they have a car, and that is a community service car. Stacy Rassin goes from community to community throughout the county. So unless it's an emergency, if it's an emergency, it's the closest car, and everyone will come. I mean, if it's a car accident, people hurt, anything like that, something violent, we respond to that. Otherwise, you're put on the list, and we have all of Marquette County. And it will get done to, but you're talking probably many, many hours that we will get to, unlike the dedicated, where they are in Marquette Township.
I'm going to bring up retail frauds. It seems that's been floating around a lot. If you take, I think this year, we have 100 retail frauds this year, and we're up about 60. Our township dedicated patrol has taken 87 of those retail frauds. If you take that by the number of the complaints that we actually have in Marquette Township, your retail fraud is about 4%, 3%. That's all it is. And it's not taking up much of our time. We do have a 4-step phase on retail frauds that I'll touch on real quick. If someone takes a pack of gum, we're in and out, 5 minutes. That's it, in and out. The only time we take someone to jail in a retail fraud is there's 4 ways. One is if the dollar amount's over $35. Number 2, if the person that was at one of the stores, if they're stealing, if they're fighting or injuring somebody else in that local business, they'll go to jail. If they don't provide proper identification when we show up, they'll go to jail. And the fourth one would be if they're habitual offenders. If they're always stealing, they're gonna go to jail. Otherwise, your typical retail fraud call comes in. It's not on the top of our priority list. We're still gonna answer our priority call first, unless something else is going on. But the officer or the deputy will go in, usually talks to loss prevention. Loss prevention has all the paperwork done. They're actually doing the paperwork. They're actually getting the video for us. We're not sitting down and watching video. We go in, we identify the person. We ask loss prevention what happened. They tell us in about 5 minutes what happened. They write their report. We talk to the person that committed the crime. Yep, that's what happened. We fingerprint them, and we just submit a short report to the prosecutor's office, but it's a loss prevention's report. And the video that goes in depth, that's what takes the time. That's not us. So I just wanted to clear that up, that we're not spending many man-hours on retail frauds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Detective Lieutenant Lowell Larson with the Sheriff's Office. A couple items I'd like to touch on. One being basically what is retail fraud? What do you think of when you hear the word or the term retail fraud? And a lot of people think shoplifting and the pack of gum, such as you stated. And I have a good experience with retail fraud. I was the Marquette Township contract deputy from 2010 to 2012, an afternoon shift, so I had plenty of contact there. And I noticed the type of people that I dealt with in a retail fraud situation. So I wanted to take my assumptions for what I feel are the type of people committing retail frauds and test them to the numbers. So just today, I took a snapshot of 3 months through our record management system of all retail fraud cases. And I wanted to look at who's first-time offender and who's been in trouble before. And what I did was I compared the people that we had arrested or had contact with in the retail fraud and compared them to and looked to see if they had been lodged in our jail on different charges, such as domestic violence, OWI, or any type of other property crimes. So what I found out when I ran these numbers was that 40% of the people that we had contact on the retail fraud were people that are committing other crimes, property crimes, drug crimes, serious crimes, and then the rest, 60%, had not been lodged at our jail. I can't say that they're not repeat offenders because they might be from a different jurisdiction or they weren't simply lodged on it. Of that 60% that aren't what I would term I use frequent flyers, a thing that I would like you to consider is what impact does that arrest have on that person's life? And is that arrest stopping them from a life of crime because we had intervention early on? And is that person committing that crime because of substance abuse or some other issue where probation or court conditions will help put that person on the right track? And the other thing I want you to look at is that when we take someone out of that store in handcuffs, and those little kids are wide-eyed looking at us when we're marching that person to our patrol car, what impact are we having on those individuals as they see that it's not right to steal? And I think that's tremendous. And it kind of reminds me of a theory that I learned when I went to Northern for Criminal Justice, and that was called the broken window theory. And if you're not familiar with that theory, it's the idea that if you allow a broken window in your community to stay broken and you don't take the time to fix it, what's that say about your community? And it's more of a form of study would be monitoring urban environments to prevent small crimes to create an atmosphere of order and lawfulness, thereby preventing more serious crimes from happening. So what I'm saying here is, thank God that we live in a community that we're talking about retail frauds and that we can address those retail frauds, and that we set that order and order of lawfulness that's what we portray by addressing this. Another thing I'd like you to think about is what impact does retail fraud have in your township? I want you to think about a number right now. Your local Walmart store, how much is lost in shrinkage, theft, in 1 year? In 1 year, what's the dollar amount that goes out that door unlawfully? Got your number in your head? All right. That number from October to October, $525,000. Marquette Walmart alone, $525,000. Okay? Now that's just Walmart. Let's extrapolate that to all the businesses in Marquette Township. What kind of impact are we having? And me personally, as a detective lieutenant, I would prefer to arrest someone on a retail fraud because the case is a little bit easier when I have someone like Donna Reif that catches a frequent flyer and I can get them in jail on that arrest compared to having to track them when they do a home invasion or other type of property crime in the housing area. Crime has no border. So if we can work with those loss prevention people, that's fantastic. And like Donna alluded to earlier, the working relationship we have is fantastic. I go to her with serious crimes that occur in the area or large traffic accidents. They have the surveillance equipment. They help us. They don't make me get a search warrant or subpoena. They spend hours reviewing video for me, and it's made my job a lot easier. And they've worked very well with us. One last point, I just want you to think about the near future here in Marquette Township, what you have coming on. You got a lot of stuff on your plate. You got a lot of hard decisions. But one thing to consider with the new Meijer store coming in, this is unconfirmed, it's just been what I've been told through the rumor mill, is their retail fraud, how they handle it, they're hands-on, meaning that they don't do cooperative detainment, they actually are hands-on, meaning that they will arrest the subject. Okay, I don't know if anyone else has heard that. So when you're going from cooperative detainment to a store that's going to be hands-on, you're going to have people that have been kind of just doing push-outs, walking out the door with lots of merchandise, and we're going to have, probably fights in the parking lot and people in handcuffs waiting for our arrival. And then, of course, your major 41 corridor construction coming up in a couple of years is going to create some traffic issues. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So just in closing and conclude, he's going to pass out the stats that he gathered. One of the interesting one is the destruction of property and larceny and break-in and entries. You know, it's last year it was 194 and it's 160 this year, and it's been going down. And I totally believe that is for a reason. And it's the presence, the detective work, and being people seeing you out there. So with that, I just would like to open up to any questions or comments. And we're, as they said, and we're very happy working with Marquette Township. And we have no gripes, and we totally understand the budget thing. We're hit with the same thing, and it's a very hard decision. So just thank you very much.
I think I've got a couple questions right off the bat. Absolutely, I don't think anybody here has a problem with what you guys are doing, and I think some of the rumor mill was that, what have you got against the sheriff's department? That totally is 100% wrong. That's not it at all. And I think what I was thinking was we'd keep our full-time day person and cut the 20 hours to the evening, the second shift, just because of the volume. And that's absolutely what we're looking for is presence. That's where we want the focus to be more so, and patrolling. And I think I told you the first time we met, start at one end of the township, do a loop, go down the center, go back, and just constantly so everybody can see you. So my question though is, I remember someone in your office, and I don't remember who, because I'm sorry I don't know all of your people, mentioning about how long it takes to process stuff once you do, and maybe it's the dollar volume. If there is some kind of fraud arrest, then you've got to go back and spend an hour, 2 hours, which is what bothered me the most, thinking if we're spending all that time for something that the company can do their own loss prevention for and get our guys, you guys, back out on the road, to me that seemed like a waste because, again, the residents aren't being helped. Is this kind of wrong? Am I, because you were saying like 5 minutes with a pack of gum. I mean, I don't know how many packs you got, but.
Well, one thing that we have done, one of the changes I've implemented is that used to take officers off the road is the actual booking of the suspect. Now, all agencies in Marquette County basically drop the person off, and my correctional officers are now doing the bookings, the fingerprinting, and that because it's, first of all, for me, it just totally made sense. It's more consistent instead of, you know, when I was in Chalkley near the end as a chief, working day shifts, and I'd only make 4 or 5 arrests a month. Well, I'd have to go in and figure out what the password was, and I was there for 45 minutes. You drop this person off, and you give the reports, and if he's suicidal, or all the information, and now the correctional officers are doing the booking. So we've cut down on a lot with that type of thing. I don't know some of the other.
So it was like that before, so what I heard might have been right.
We had Super One that was very active. Walmart, like I said before, Walmart already had all the stuff done. So we're pretty much picking up the report. They already have the video, or they look at the news, they'll send us the video 5 days later. So we're not sitting there anymore, we're not watching video. We're not doing a whole investigation of what happened because it's already been done by loss prevention. So it's cut down a lot, and then with the booking to the jail, it's just, there's all control time.
Good.
Believe it or not, we're actually putting about 25,000 miles out a year in Marquette Township control. So the car is moving around a lot.
Okay, well, that answered that misconception. Does anybody else have questions?
I just had one. If Walmart has loss prevention of $500,000 a year, wouldn't it behoove them to hire a security team? It'd be a lot cheaper to be in there. They would arrest the people, hold them, you guys come in and take them to jail. Wouldn't that save everybody a lot of money?
That's kind of already what they're doing when they do it.
I can speak on that behalf.
Come over here, Donna, to the.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, the sheriff really can't answer that. That's at Walmart. But it's a good idea.
Hello again. When it comes down to basically the security in the store, Walmart takes safety as the first precaution.
Don't give away any secrets now. Just
I
protect
promise.
yourself.
We take safety of our customers and our suspects as a first precaution when it comes to any kind of theft that happens in the store. For one, to, like you said, you know, why don't we hire our own security people? We have security cameras in place that are outstanding. We have myself, and when you talk about that budget, I'm just going to hit a little bit on a couple of things. Last year, your budget for the Sheriff's Department was probably a lot less coming to Walmart, and I'm sure these guys can attest to it because we didn't have a loss prevention person in place. I was there for years prior, took one of those 9-to-5 jobs for a while, so we didn't have a person in place, and now that I've been back since October 2016, it has gone up drastically, okay? One of the things that we do is we make sure that our customers are safe, first and foremost, whether they are guilty of retail theft or not. These officers, when they do respond to a call, the parking lot itself is patrolled by the customers out there wanting to know what's going on. They see that officer's vehicle there. Now, we have an average of probably 4,000 customers a week that come into our store. That's 4,000 people within a week period of time that see that officers patrol the car in that area and know what's going on in that store. Not only do they respond to theft, but they also have responded to EMS or emergency situations as well. In the past 3 days, I've had 5 different scenarios that I can tell you that have happened that have involved the sheriff department. When they respond, it's usually cut and dry. I usually have the suspect in the office. Guilty, not guilty, that's their choice. What I've observed, what I've done. It is a short process. The ID's already there. They take the information. If there's not other circumstances that are involved, they're on their way. So as far as loss prevention taking up the time of the sheriff's department, we're not taking up a lot of their time. But if we do not have the hours for the sheriff's department to be there, I'm on call waiting for a central dispatch to send me somebody. And that puts myself, my store, and my customers in jeopardy when I'm sitting behind closed doors with a suspect who has committed a crime in my store. And when they talk about repeat offenders, a lot of these people that I deal with in my profession are repeat offenders. There's usually drug-related issues involved because obviously they don't have the financial stability to purchase the items that they're stealing, okay? So at any given time, anything else could happen with that as well. So I'm supportive of this because of the statistics that we have at Walmart. And yeah, putting more security people in place at Walmart would be fine. Right now, we're doing a good job of manning what we do to try and keep our inventory and our shrink low. Unfortunately, you know, every measure that we take doesn't always work. Putting me back in place obviously has worked. We went from a statistic, I gave Deputy Larson here a statistic earlier. From January 1st of this year until today's present, I have 130 apprehensions in my system where I physically have apprehended these people, okay? Out of that 138, 116 of them were prosecuted, which means, according to Walmart standards, anything over $25 or they're repeat offenders, okay? So that is what we prosecute. Now, I've been in a situation a couple years ago where we met with the prosecutor's office and he's like, well, why aren't you trespassing these people the first time that they steal? I can't trespass someone for making a mistake the first time. The second time, absolutely. You know, based on different scenarios, we decide to trespass, but 99% of the time, I do not trespass someone for the first time that they steal in my store. That is my policy. They made a mistake, they're going to suffer the consequences. You know, if you want to come back and choose to do it again, absolutely you're going to be trespassed. And that is going to stop that habitual offender from coming back. Okay? So we have processes in place to reduce that. But having the sheriff's department at our access is more beneficial for the safety of our customers that come into our store, more beneficial to me, and more beneficial to the community. We talked about, you know, cutting the 20 hours. I don't know if you're going to cut them at the beginning of a shift or the end of a shift. I know I have what's called a bewitching hour at Walmart. I try not to take my lunch during this hour. I try not to take break during this hour. And honestly, the busiest time for our customers in our store is between the hours of 3 and 7. You have the ones who are getting in there and getting their stuff to get out before they get home and get their kids from school, or the ones who just got off work and are getting in there to get their stuff and get out before they have to get home and make dinner. That is my bewitching hour. So depending on where you amend these hours to and to where to cut these hours, I can tell you that those are my most productive hours for me and for my business. So having these guys available to me is very important. We talked a little bit about the rapport that we have with them. You know, it's not just about me and loss prevention at Walmart. I mean, I deal with other loss prevention associates from other from other retailers as well. But that is a major intersection right there, and I know they talked about earlier about this tunnel going through. It's going to be a part of the effect of Walmart as well. I have pulled numerous videos of accidents that have occurred at that intersection for these officers when they respond. You know, so there is a good rapport there. They can feel comfortable coming to me and say, hey, you know, this just happened, can you give me some video on it? And usually within minutes I can. If I'm not at home, they call me, you know, I can't get it to you today, I get it to you tomorrow. So I get it to them as soon as I can. So we have that rapport that's built up with these officers. And to be able to access them when we need them is important. And for them to be able to come to us is also important as well. So I support the hours that are there now. I know there's a full-time during the day. I deal with him a lot. There's a full-time in the evening. I deal with him a lot. I do my best to make sure that their time is spent quality time with me, you know, we don't just sit around and BS in the office, you know, and look at video of somebody dancing on the sales floor or anything like that. You know, I get what I need from them in a timely manner so that they can still provide the service that they need to for the community, as well as the same they do for me. You know, they don't try and take up my time, you know, on frivolous things as well. So it's an important necessity for Marquette Township. And being from Walmart in Marquette Township, I think it's a necessity for us as well.
Thank you. Very. Any more questions from the board for anybody? Pete?
We're told that it takes 2 hours for processing it, but you said that you changed all that so you don't have the long period of time. In other areas, they have $100. They're gonna call after, if you go up to $100, you have $35, 25. Okay, some have went up to $100 before they call, and we just discussed that also, but it's a hard decision.
Ultimately, that would be, I think, the prosecutor's decision. That's what we talked about. But, you know, and I had heard things about.
Greg, do you want to get to the microphone? No one's going to hear you otherwise.
I had heard things about, you know, not responding to the commercial type of thing. We can't say we're going to do this and not this. You know, if it's a crime, we have to respond to it, and we have to do the follow-up and the necessary work that goes with it. So we can't pick and choose what crimes that we enforce.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only comment I would make in closing is to, you know, thank the Sheriff's Department for their service. We have a very good working rapport with our deputies, with Deputy Ward, Deputy Loonsfoot primarily. And we have other deputies that fill in, but we've always had a very good relationship with them, and they are around when we need them. You know, so I mean, it's not, certainly I don't want anybody to take away from this if there's anything that we feel is wrong with the Sheriff's Department or anything along those lines. It's strictly a dollars and cents question for us, and, you know, and the board, you know, between now and the 19th, when they ultimately adopt a budget, we'll be back in looking again after we take the public comment, and go back in and, you know, process what they've heard and go forward.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it. We can close that part of the public hearing then. 8:28. And then open the public hearing on the 2018 tax levy.
You have seen this before. This came to you in September as a preliminary.
Thanks, folks.
We do have to, you know, basically what it amounted to is the assessor had to certify for the county assessing department, what the levies were that we were going to be levying in 2018. It came to you for approval and then was submitted to the county. This is now the formal public hearing on that taxation, and it's your opportunity to take comment from the residents about the taxation that you intend to levy and what for. And that was also advertised in the public hearing notice.
Oh, to comment? Okay, yeah. Is there any public that wants to talk about the budget?
Tax levy.
Tax levy? Yeah. Pardon? Oh, okay.
Joe Shetter, 220 Chapel Ridge again. First time in 10 years I've come to a meeting. I respect your time. Haven't been here. I know you guys are in budget things, read the paper, watch the YouTube videos. As a taxpayer, 2 young kids, my wife has a business in the city. I have one in the city as well. The Sheriff's Department hours, I understand it's hard to project finances. You run a business, you run finances. 4 months he mentioned. Everyone would like 4 months. Everyone would like to have 4 months. Let's just consider as a whole those hours of if there is a call. I've never had to use the Sheriff's Department, don't plan on having to use the Sheriff's Department. If I ever need assistance, I've got a feeling there's already going to be something taken care of before the Sheriff's Department gets to where I'm at. As a committee, as a board from you guys, if you could just reconsider, think it over, the importance. I know you said you've cut before from 80 to 60 hours. Let's keep that in mind. Everyone wants to put it back on the retail fraud, the highway corridor. Let's go back to the 4,000 residents that pay taxes twice a year and provide that extra service that you believe is important. I have no affiliation with the Sheriff's Department or anything in the park, but I think it's important to have public policing seen, heard, and taken part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Joe.
With regard to the tax levy, and there's a lot of confusion about taxes in the township in terms of what is township tax and what isn't. And just to put it out there, as was advertised, basically the millages that will be levied by the township for township collection are the township operating millage is 4.905. So that's our operating 4 mills, 4.905 mills. Library is 0.9061. It's a 1 mill levy, but it's
Reduced by the
Headley.
Yeah, by the Headley Amendment. It's going from both sides here. From the Headley Amendment, and then Act 33 is our 2.75 for fire protection. That's specific for fire protection. And just for the record, the board had talked about the possibility of putting out a millage question for law enforcement as well. Our fire department is funded by a specific millage, so that's a separate piece of a budget. And then on the road millage, we are collecting 1.5 mils to pay for the road repairs that we've done. So that is the total millage for the township that we actually receive. Everything else that's collected that you see in our tax bills is distributed to other entities in the county.
Okay. Anybody else wish to comment on the levy? Anybody else? I want to make sure. Anybody else? Okay, it's closed at 8:31. Next on the agenda is a memo from the DDA regarding corridor lighting.
Yeah, this derives from your, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This derives from your last meeting. There was a question that was raised, or a concern that was raised, that the DDA had not weighed in at all on the lighting issue. The chair of the DDA committee, Todd Nordyke, did put together this memo in response, and in essence what he's saying basically is that yes, the DDA has been involved but has not indicated any kind of a position up to this point pending the completion of expansion of the corridor boundaries. The rationale is that in 2019, when the construction is going on for the roundabouts and the lighting is going to be necessary, that there would be a levy. The DDA would levy within the expanded boundary 1 to 2 mills that would help assist pay for the lighting that the board is concerned about. So that it's basically from the DDA indicating that yes, they have been involved, they are aware, and are intending to participate with the board, provided the boundaries are extended.
And we're waiting for legal on that.
Well, we're waiting for the process. There is a whole process that has to go through to extend the boundaries. Part of it is establishing a property description, which is in process and maybe close to completion. And then beyond that, there's a series of, I think at least, is it 2 public hearings?
Probably 1 public hearing, because we are not going to have to either amend or adopt tax incremental financing.
Right.
And since we are also not planning on having either a TIF or revenue bonds, that would be what the second public hearing would have been if either of those were financing options. So I believe we can do it in one option. The process itself is underway. I plan to have a resolution. The next step is going to be a resolution that this board has to adopt with a number of criteria and findings in it that will then essentially set the timeline for the public hearing.
And along with that, as Jason mentioned in his comment, neither one of us really had an opportunity to speak with any of the board members because this just came up late yesterday, and we got information this morning. So, with regard to a potential additional grant that might be available.
Dave.
Hopefully, it will continue that way. We're surprised things will continue to come up, and we'll end up with having the resources without having to go back to the residents.
Do we have any forecast on what 1 mill would realize in revenue from an expanded DDA?
1 mill in the current, well, it's hard to say because we do have development that's going on within the area right now that would be included in the expanded DDA. Our estimate right now is that, and again, this is an estimate, it's a rough estimate, is that 1 mill would generate in the neighborhood of 120 to 130,000 annually. rough estimate. And again, that's going to be impacted by whatever happens with the Menards and Escanaba case. It's going to be impacted by what gets built and in what stage of construction it is at the time, because what goes on the tax roll basically is as of December 31st, which is tax day, annual tax day, whatever the condition of that property is at that point is its taxable value for the next year. So if, well, Myers under construction right now, as of December 31st of this year, whatever percentage of that store is completed will be on the tax roll for 2018. It won't be on the full tax roll until after December 31st of 2018, if it's completed at that point, which we expect it will be. They're targeting May as their opening. So that would be a 2019 revenue.
Ernie?
Anything we do at the DDA, we will not see any of those funds until 19.
Correct. They'll be collected in early 19. So they would be usable for the 19 construction.
Anything else on that? We're good? Okay. Community linkage. That's just a placeholder, really. I'm working on that right now. I've got a message into Susan to help work on next year's plan of attack. So I'll be getting back to you on that. Policy discussion involves our meeting dates for all of the township committees, DDA, roads, recreation, planning, and the board. Who wants to comment on that?
I
know
put
John
this,
has something to mention.
I put this together a couple weeks ago. My only question of the board is, do you want to keep your meetings at 6:30 or do you want to move them back to 7? I think 6:30 is good, but that's just my take.
I like 6:30. Thoughts? Anybody care?
As long as
like
we get out by
6:30.
8, we're fine.
Yeah.
Except tonight.
Yeah.
John did have some points he'd like to bring up about the...
Actually, my question is, the road committee has, according to the announcement made 2 weeks ago, has had its last meeting. Is that correct?
No.
You're going to, last report?
No. That's not correct.
Okay, then tell us where you are.
What I said at the last report was, what I said at the last report was is that the road committee, the road rehabilitation project was complete with the construction phase. So that would be the last report for that. There's still maintenance in the road rehabilitation project, which lasts for another mere 12 years.
A restoration will be in the spring. We still have some restoration for springtime.
So the meeting schedule is required?
Correct.
Okay. On the planning commission, we have scheduled, or it has been scheduled for 22 meetings. Some of the most important decisions made in our community are made by the appointed planning commission members. For that reason, and in the interest of protecting local interests, our township supervisor and the full township board needs to have a greater understanding of what's going to be on the planning commission docket. I would ask for some kind of discussion between our supervisor and the chair of the planning commission to develop some kind of a report so that we will know more about what's they're having planning on their docket. The reason for that is, well, it's pretty obvious. The other thing is that I wondered whether that shouldn't be a question as to whether, well, any meetings that they need beyond 22, we would grant that if they had a justification for it. In fact, we could probably ask whether 22 meetings need to be scheduled. I don't know that that's the case. I would ask the question of the Planning Commission is, could we cut that back to 11 and then simply allow other meetings if they're needed? And the reason for that is scheduling 22 meetings in advance probably means you're going to have 22 meetings. And there's 5 members on the Planning Commission. That's $250 a meeting. In addition, that's a lot of comp time for 2 employees of the township that attend those meetings. If you just cut it to scheduling 11, that's a savings of $2,750 out of the budget. And clearly, it's a savings of comp time. I quickly want to say, if you need more meetings, we could have them. But scheduling 22, I think should be pretty well received. You're going to have 22 meetings. So I would ask our supervisor and perhaps the chair of the Planning Commission to consider cutting back the scheduled meetings to 11, just for that purpose, because of the budget situation we're in. And I'd be the first to say if you needed more, we would grant that.
Okay, that's a rather lengthy discussion I think the board has to have, but that's one of the discussions we are going to have next year in our annual plan of work, planning department. And having been a planner, I would definitely say 22 meetings and then don't do the meetings you don't need, because that can happen frequently if you're waiting for site plans or whatever.
That's what happens now.
Yeah, pretty much. But
how many meetings do they cancel?
I don't know this year. I don't know if
Just
Jason
canceled one the
knows.
other day.
Half dozen or more.
Dave, did you have your hand up?
No, that was it. I wanted to make the point that we do on a regular basis. If there's not an agenda that needs addressing, we do cancel meetings quite frequently. And it is a fluid situation in summertime and during construction season. It requires the 2 meetings a month to address all the issues that are going on. And as far as what their scope of work is, it's pretty clearly defined in the duties and responsibilities of the Planning Commission as to what type of things they work on. But on a regular basis, the meetings are canceled if there's not any work that is needed. That time is paramount that it be done, that we cancel the meeting. And I think we just canceled the last couple because we don't have any pressing agenda items. There's always something you can do, but there's no pressing agenda items. So in the interest of saving staff time and planning commissioners' time, we cancel the meetings.
And, yeah, but we can talk about that. We will discuss the departments.
And this schedule's more than just, it's basically just placeholders. I mean, each committee is still going to approve their own meeting schedule, but it's easier to have meetings scheduled, or it's harder to schedule meetings and easier to cancel them.
Definitely.
So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting date schedule.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, Jason, you're up again. Recommend zoning text amendments. First reading, planning zoning definitions and amendments. We did have a request, Jason, just for the future, and I'll try to mention it to Andra, because when she puts the agenda together, she doesn't know what we're doing, you know, specifically. She'll type up what we have.
I always try to get to the top, believe me.
Oh, not only that, well, we didn't expect the crowd either.
Right.
I didn't.
Understood.
But in the future, to put a little more information on the agenda, if you give her that item, please, so the public knows It's the
regarding
planning
what?
department and what it's involved with, in this case, definitions, some cases, or if you wanted to put, you know, tiny homes or whatever the topic is.
Sure.
So the public knows whether they want to attend the meeting or not.
Okay,
That would be
will
great.
do.
Thank you.
So this is the first reading, so we can dig into this tonight, or you can parlay this till the next, because there are 2 readings required. Thank you. But essentially, we're looking at, and what we did in the planning commission to make it easier for you, if you guys want to vote on each article of the ordinance to move along or not move along, that would probably be helpful, because I know trustee Marks has some concerns or questions about one of them. But essentially, the planning commission is proposing several zoning text amendments regarding pedestrian safety, enhanced aesthetics, tiny home regulations, and the inclusion of tiny homes as a land use in the township. And one additional one that discusses the usage of shipping containers being prohibited as accessory structures in the community. So these particular zoning text amendments have been in the process for over a year. And we've waited for the city of Marquette to get through some of their discussion on short-term rentals, of which we took the angle of not touching that subject right now because there is pending legislation which could prohibit a local municipality from having any say on short-term rentals. So we put that on the back burner, and we'll address that as needed moving forward. But with regard to these proposed amendments, there's been work sessions that have taken place, collaboration with local developers and real estate representatives. We've had duly called public hearings as required by state statute, and the Planning Commission has reviewed these following zoning text amendments. And the County Planning Commission has also reviewed those as a requirement of the state statute. So here we go. These are terms that we're proposing to add to Article 2, which that article of the zoning ordinance basically is the definition. So it's always good to have good definitions in your zoning ordinance, so that there are no questions about what terms mean, shall and may, etc. So we're proposing to add camper, cargo container, shipping container, and tiny home. Probably the most questioned term would be tiny home, which is proposed to say a manufactured or conventionally built structure 450 square feet or less, which may be built on a steel undercarriage with the necessary wheel assembly to be transported to a permanent or semi-permanent site. The steel undercarriage and or wheels may be removed when placed upon a permanent foundation. And one of the reasons we wanted to include camper was so that it is not misconstrued as a tiny home, and that'll be brought up in later discussion. So those are the proposed additions to Article 2, and if you're happy with those, you can move them along to the second reading, whatever your pleasure, or if there are any questions.
John?
Just ask for a division of the 2 so that we act on them separately.
On each
You have 2 before you, tiny home and pedestrian connectivity. That's what's before us tonight.
Okay, yeah,
And that, it's a package, but, so I'm asking you that a package be separated, and pedestrian connectivity, if it'll help. If you don't have any problem with division of them, I suggest that be taken first. I have no problem with that one.
Does that make a difference to you, Jason?
I guess I'd like to, for the rest of the board's edification, to go through these quickly.
Okay. Roger?
You actually have 3 proposals on your plate tonight. The third one is the prohibition of shipping containers or storage containers as structures. So it would maybe be logical, even though there may not be a ton of discussion, especially on that one, to make the division 3 ways. rather
Okay.
than 2.
Okay. Any way the chair wants to do it.
Whatever is either legal or most expeditious, too.
I can get through them pretty quickly.
Okay.
The following are an extension of our design standards, okay? So the second, and Articles 7 and 8, we're proposing to add to the general business and development district an amendment that would require for pedestrian pathways to be implemented when certain criteria have been met. So in both sections 7.10, which is the development district, and 8.10, which is the general business district, you would add the following text. All commercial or business developments open to the public shall provide safe pedestrian connectivity within the development district and/or general business zoning districts in the following manner. From a public entrance of a development to the required parking area. Number 2, a pathway to adjoining or disconnected buildings if they exist within a single parcel and serve the general public use, unless the connection would require a running slope that exceeds 5%, which is ADA compliance, or unless the total length of the pathway would exceed 200 feet. Most of the developments along those 2 zoning districts are within 200 feet of the roadway or their boundary. A separated pathway to existing public walkways, unless that connection again would exceed the 5% rule or the 200-foot rule. Number 4 would be pedestrian connections shall be constructed in compliance with the American Disabilities Act guidelines and shall incorporate universal design principles. That one is anything that's constructed by a commercial contractor has to be ADA compliant, but having this in the ordinance allows us to gain extra points on a grant application by stating and reaffirming that. And number 5, these pathway improvements shall be made by the developer at the developer's expense, not the taxpayer's expenses.
So Jason, if I may clarify a little, some of the discussion, gosh, this has been like a year this has been going on. In the beginning was, okay, then the developer's got to, or the property owner has to, you know, build a sidewalk and put bricks in and tar it and everything else. And that isn't always the case. It depends on the circumstances. But what you're trying to do is, or suggest, is make like a dotted line so that the pedestrians know and the drivers know where people are going to be walking. It's for their protection, unless it's something that does have to be divided with like a sidewalk or something.
Correct. There's terminology in there that says either separated or not separated. That way it provides some leniency to the developer as to how they want to develop that pathway. Some of the most contentious discussion that we had with the developers or the real estate side was the distance of what they would have to construct. And we were able to come to a compromise on the 200 feet. So we feel that both with the developer side and with the township side, at least from the planning commission's perspective, that our goals were met and some common ground was found. So the developers, you know, the contingency that we talked to were satisfied with this proposal. We think it's a great addition to the business district and the development district. And again, the separated pathways are only required when an existing public walkway is out front. So essentially, a lot of properties would have to turn over on the eastern end, but we're looking forward to the western end, and if we are able to construct pathways, the simplest way I can portray that is if you were to walk on the east side of Marquette, you have a sidewalk in front of your home, and you have a pathway that comes out your front door and goes to that sidewalk. It's very similar to what we would be asking of these developers. If you construct a new business and there's a pathway in front of your store, all we're asking you to do is connect your parking lot to that pathway with an ADA accessible and navigable grade.
Do you want to stop and ask if there's questions, or does anybody have anything on that part?
Oh, you can stop
so
me
far?
anytime.
Okay, anything? Okay.
Otherwise, I'll continue. So, you know, there's some planning terminology that's going around right now, and there's some movements that are happening, and the tiny home movement is one of them. This isn't something that's going to go away. These photos that I'm going to show you are from Dickinson Family Homes, this one in particular. This is on their website. They have been calling around and asking local municipalities what their zoning regulations are on tiny homes, obviously from a marketing standpoint for them. But it also provides notice to local municipalities and all of our planning trade magazines. They all speak to short-term rentals, tiny homes, and medical marijuana. Those are the top 3 terms that we are having to address right now. And so, in my opinion, and in the Planning Commission's opinion, tiny homes are something that we should address. And there's a number of reasons why, and we'll get into those a little bit. So over the last 40 years, the average home in the United States has increased in size by more than 1,000 square feet, essentially doubling the amount of living space a person has utilized since 1973. But a decade ago, in the midst of the housing boom, an explosion in outsized luxury homes construction, i.e. the McMansions, a quieter, smaller movement began to happen. Based on economy of scale, and these photos are the interior of the first home that I showed you. So these, I guess there's a misconception on what these could look like or could be, but they are catching hold and they are adding to the housing stock. So if you look at this from, at least as a planner's perspective, you want to provide equitable housing for all stages of life. Affordable housing is an issue in the city of Marquette, and affordable housing is really an issue across the United States of America. So it's something that we should look at. The average cost of a standard size home in the United States is approximately $272,000 plus an additional $200,000 if you tack on a 30-year mortgage. An average cost of a tiny home is $23,000 if built by the homeowner, and the price tag typically doubles if a builder is used or a contractor is used. So these are other examples of homes that people are using. Obviously, they provide less clutter, less time to maintain. There's more savings involved. There's a higher quality of life attributed to these because, well, in perception, because you don't have as much stuff. It's a simpler lifestyle. There's a lower carbon footprint, lower energy draw. There's lots of, in fact, honestly, you know, my wife and I, when this subject came up, we really dove into this and kind of looked around at a lot of different styles of home, and it's pretty interesting what's going on across the United States. So what we're proposing to do is by special use allow these in the residential zoning districts. Now, during the public comment period and public hearings that we had at the Planning Commission level, there was a lot of pushback from some of the subdivisions. And the reason is because the people who moved to the subdivisions, they moved there for a specific reason. They have a certain size home, certain size yard, and they don't want to have encroachment of things that could possibly detract from their home values. Completely understood, and probably not an ideal situation for a tiny home. I don't foresee somebody spending $60,000 on a lot in Bishop Woods and then constructing a $40,000 tiny home. However, most subdivisions have covenants. That's why people move to subdivisions, because there are rules and regulations that protect them from situations that arise, such as short-term rentals or a tiny home movement. It would be spot zoning, in my opinion, and probably Rogers as well, to take Oak Hill, Bishop Woods, Huron Woods, and remove them from allowing tiny homes to be constructed there if you were going to allow tiny homes to be constructed in what you would typically want them, where you want them to be, which is the rural residential zoning district. All of those subdivisions I just described reside in the rural residential zoning district, and that carries a 1 acre minimum, but oftentimes it's much more than that. So in the Huron Woods case, which is where we really, Bishop Woods case, which is where we really got the pushback from, they're in the process, because of actually the discussion about these proposed zoning text amendments, of getting their homeowners association together and reactivating their covenants, which is fantastic for them. But I will say that the zoning district that makes the most sense to have tiny homes, besides the urban residential district where there's smaller lots and more density, would be the rural residential zoning district. So I'm pretty sure that's where Mr. Marks might go, but I'm not positive. But we are proposing to allow this by special use permit only. That means that the applicant has to come before the planning commission at a duly called public hearing, and all the neighbors within 300 feet of that property are notified, and they have they can come in on a case-by-case basis and state their claim on why they want to have a tiny home. And not only that, but there's another amendment that's proposed to complement this addition to the land use nomograph, where there'll be specific criteria that'll have to be met before the planning commission would even consider that special use permit application. Let's see. I'll keep going here. This amendment also pertains to tiny homes and denotes the minimum requirements for tiny homes that would be required as a special land use. And because there's adjustments to Article 16, which is the detailed use regulations. So Article 16 talks about the specific criteria that are required for tiny homes to be even considered. Also within Article 16 is our discussion about accessory structures. And we've seen a lot of these pop up on Craigslist. They're pretty cheap, you know, $2,000, they'll drop one off at your house, and they do provide sound, climate controlled, well, somewhat, storage. But the Planning Commission and staff felt that these were better suited, not in our community, as far as using them as accessory structures. So, you know, we want accessory structures, whether it be a garage or a shed, to complement in material and type, I guess, residential development. And we feel that this is a little bit more industrial and something that, that we want to keep out of the neighborhoods. Now, I know a lot of commercial users probably would like to have these. They do provide, you know, secure storage, et cetera. I'm not sure what the movement is on this, but they are becoming more and more prevalent, and something that I think we should take care of now. So with regard to tiny homes, in order to be even considered to have a special use permit application considered by the Planning Commission, we're recommending an amendment to this section 1613. So you'd be adding 1613 tiny homes, and it would say, in addition to complying with all other relevant sections of the ordinance, except for minimum square footage requirements, petitioners desiring to site and or construct a tiny home as defined in section 202, the home shall also provide the following information to be considered for a special land use permit: a Marquette County building permit, a Marquette County Health Department permit, off-street parking conforming to residential single-family dwelling units under Article 21, which pretty much states 2 parking spaces per dwelling, connection to a public sewer and water supply in compliance with the Marquette Township requirements, or to such private facilities as provided by the Marquette County Health Department. So what we wanted to address is to make sure, first of all, that the county is aware of it. They do have provisions for tiny homes. They haven't had very many permanent structures located in the county, but they are amenable to allowing a building permit for a tiny home provided that it meets their minimum requirements. We wanted to make sure that if sanitary sewer and water were located along a street frontage, say in the urban residential district where a tiny home would be located, that they would be required to be treated just as any other full-size home, let's say. Or conversely, if they were located off the grid somewhere, they would have to get the county permit for their well and septic, as would any other home builder.
So if they had utilities in front of them, they would be required to
That's correct.
hook up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then finally, on the bottom of this page, it says number 11, which details this shipping container issue again. Shipping containers, cargo containers, semi-trailers, or any other originally designed to be attached to, transported, or towed by a motorized vehicle shall be prohibited. Pretty cut and dry. And finally, the last proposed zoning text amendment is to Article 19, performance requirements. So in here, right now, because what we have in the ordinance requires that minimum first floor area square footage of 1,000 square feet, there is an addendum proposed at the very end that says the minimum floor area, minimum exterior breadth caliper with dimensions provided in section 1906 shall not apply to tiny homes as defined in Article 2. So you always want to have that check and balance to make sure that, okay, it's not going to apply to tiny homes, but it has to meet the definition of in Article 2, which pretty much stipulates that 450 square feet or less. And that 450 square feet was derived from the fact that we do allow seasonal cottages and other things that are a little bit larger than that by either special land use permit now or by right, depending upon which zoning district they're in. If they're out in resource production where you have a 40-acre minimum, obviously the regulations are a little bit looser out there. So those are the proposed zoning text amendments in their entirety for this round anyway.
How about the third one that Roger mentioned?
So you have pedestrian connectivity, tiny home issue, and the shipping container. Those are the three.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
So questions for Jason?
It depends on if we're going to take them.
But just before anybody votes
Questions.
or anything, if you've got questions, if you need to know anything.
So you want us to address any questions we have to all three issues?
Sure.
Okay.
While he's there.
The bottom line for me is, well, I don't have any problem with the pedestrian connectivity. I think that's been well constructed. I do feel that if we adopt the tiny homes proposed changes, what that does is it allows a tiny home to be built in an area adjacent to other homes that people have built and made investments in, and frankly, mostly that's their biggest investment and probably their biggest savings. And it could be detrimental to the value of their property by having a tiny home granted by the Planning Commission to be built next door. I think that's the objection that most people would have. And that doesn't limit it to the three subdivisions that you mentioned. It works in Trowbridge Park and anywhere else. And so think about that. That's people's put their money into homes, and it's, in most cases, for a long time, it's their biggest investment, it's their biggest savings. So if you know in advance that the possibility exists that allowing the building of something much smaller than the homes adjacent to it, you have to know that it could very well detract from the value of their investment. And that's what's wrong with that. Putting tiny homes someplace else and you providing where they could be built, vacation areas might be better suited for it, but it's not something that our taxpayers who've made an investment that they think is secure will be willing to accept in their community. And I think we owe it to them to protect that investment. So that's my objection to your tiny homes revision.
Go ahead, Jace.
So from the township standpoint, and well, let's back up. So if you have a public hearing and all neighbors within 300 feet of a property are notified, and they came in and said your very concerns, then the planning commission could effectively deny that application.
Yeah, but you're putting all of your fate in the planning commission, not the elected officials of the community, in the planning commission. And I won't put it
I understand
there.
that's a concern from you. My other question is, would you rather have vacant properties or properties that were developed with some tax base?
Well, that's a threat you can't hold up. What difference?
I'm just asking the question.
Well, I would rather have it get occupied, but that doesn't mean you're willing to accept something less that would detract from the value invested by the homeowners on adjacent.
So Jace, if you've got a 5 or a 40-acre parcel, what if you want your whole family there? Can you have like 4 or 5 or whatever that property would allow space-wise?
You could, and that provision's already in the ordinance. There's many uses that these tiny homes can have, whether it's for somebody who's retired and wants to park their tiny home for a while on somebody else's lot. As long as the minimum requirements are met for individual parcels. And what I mean by that is if you have a small parcel in Trowbridge and you have a principal structure on that property, you can have another principal structure on that property as long as if you went to sell one of them, they would have to meet the minimum requirements for setbacks, density, open space requirements, and height and bulk. The way that I see this is that you have an incredible brain drain happening in the state of Michigan because of the inability to afford housing. Affordable housing is an issue. I don't know if that's my phone. I probably is. I apologize. As a planner, you want to keep young people in the community, but these aren't the growing demographic that are using these structures. It is retired folks, people that want to have a smaller ecological footprint, that don't need the McMansion, they don't want to have all the maintenance, they just want a structure to reside in and go out and enjoy the outdoors and use their money doing other things like traveling or purchasing goods, what have you. So from my perspective, it's another way for the township to provide our residents with the ability to have affordable housing at all stages of life.
Dan?
How does it differ from a mobile home?
Well, mobile homes wouldn't be allowed to be used as.
Why? How are you separating them?
Typically, the mobile home is larger than 450 square feet.
But they're not allowed in a lot of different areas.
That's taken care of, and that was, and as a zoning administrator that's been doing this for upwards of 12, 13 years, I can tell you that a lot of communities zoned out mobile homes by stating that all walls shall have a width of 20 feet. And our ordinance is very similar to that. So there was a line drawn in the sand at some point and said that all principal structures shall have a minimum width of 20 feet on all sides. That effectively zones out mobile homes. So it's not the intention to use mobile homes as a tiny home. Plus, like I said, mobile homes are typically larger than 450 square feet, and 450 square feet is the maximum for our proposed zoning text amendment.
Tiny homes aren't all 20 feet.
Right, but they're not allowed to be any larger than 450 square feet total.
Okay, so what about, I'm just being the devil's advocate
Yes,
here.
sir.
What about somebody bringing in a travel trailer?
Well, that's the
How's
reason
that
that we
different?
added camper as a definition. And I think if you go back to camper, it says, and this is something that Planning Commissioner and Trustee Wiegand assisted in the crafting of. A structure which may be referred to as a pickup camper, travel trailer, fifth wheel, RV, or motorhome designated and manufactured to be transported, whether carried upon, towed by a vehicle, or self-propelled to a semi-permanent site. And what we're saying is that the tiny home, manufactured or conventionally built, 450 square feet or less in size, which may be built on a steel undercarriage with the necessary wheel assembly to be transported to a permanent or semi-permanent site. The steel undercarriage and/or wheels may be removed when placed upon a permanent foundation. So that was the distinction that we tried to make, and Dave, if you can add to that.
I think that the reason was one of the concerns was that, is just what you're bringing up, what's to prevent me from bringing a motorhome and setting it on a piece of property, calling it a tiny home and living in it permanent. And
hooking it up to the
and that's why
sewer.
the definition of a camper was put in there, so that it is clearly defined as a camper. It doesn't matter what you do to it, it's clearly defined as a camper, and by that definition, it cannot be considered a tiny home. And the important word there is designed and manufactured. You can bring a motorhome in and take the axles off from underneath it, but it's still designed as a motorhome, and therefore falls under the definition of a camper and cannot be used as a tiny home. That's why that was put in there.
I can see the point of John, you know, some neighborhoods wouldn't want a tiny home, they wouldn't want a camper, they wouldn't want a mobile home, they wouldn't want anything less than, I guess, what you would consider single-family residential home, you know, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet or something. Something that's going to take away from your value of your home. I mean, I'm just trying to make a point where it's not any different, a tiny home or a travel trailer, in a lot of people's opinions.
Okay, we'll go farther then as an advocate. You've got a $400,000 4-bedroom, 3-bath home and 3-car garage, and it's just gorgeous. And then somebody builds next to you some modern glass, purple house with, you know, whatever you think is disgusting.
But it has to meet.
It's there, yeah.
It has to meet.
And it does, but you don't like the design, or you don't like the color, or the windows, or the doors are crooked, or whatever.
Architectural.
Their property, they can do what they want.
I tell my kids to move somewhere else.
How many times do you hear that at the planning level? This is someone's property.
That's why they make cars different colors, right?
Yep, they can buy it and build as long as it meets whatever criteria. They can build whatever they want, whether you like it or not.
But they still have to.
That's the flip side.
Yeah.
The building restrictions. They have to meet the restrictions that the other neighbors met. They would not be allowed. Jeez.
Yeah, but we don't control color or, you know, I mean, the height.
In the
is something-
subdivisions, the minimum requirements
Yes.
are very similar. But that's not the case for the rest and the majority of the rural residential zoning district, which is a vast district in the community. And obviously, as your parcels get larger, typically the regulations become less, because you're out of sight, you're out of mind, that kind of thing.
If you got 40 acres and you're going to put it on the back of the 40, who cares?
200 feet in,
Yeah.
right. So the subdivision folks have had an issue with this, and I completely understand why. But typically, subdivisions have covenants, and they have a homeowners association that protect themselves from this very thing. Bishop Woods was developed over a series of years in different phases, and somehow, you know, they dropped the ball on that. But in my opinion, it doesn't mean that the rest of the community should suffer for what is and will be in my opinion, a very good movement that's occurring, where people are saying, look, I don't need all this. I just need this space to call home, and then I'm going to go out and recreate, or I'm going to travel, or I'm going to retire here. I don't want to have the maintenance, et cetera. So, just something to consider.
Like you said, within 300 feet, everybody that's involved in that area are going to be able to comment.
And as with any special use permit, the Planning Commission has the ability to approve, disapprove, or approve with conditions. So there's you know, our Planning Commission is pretty good, really good actually. And you know, they're not just throwing darts at the map and saying, you know, let's see if this sticks. This was, you know, highly thought through, and a lot of research was done. And if it wasn't something that I felt wasn't going to stick around for a while, we wouldn't bring it to you. But in Marquette Township, we try to be progressive and try to set the standard and lead from the front, and I think this is another example of that.
Dave?
Just to tag on to what Jason is talking about, during the public hearing process at the Planning Commission, and I think there was 2 of them.
That's correct.
With respect to this item, the only dissenters amongst the public were from the platted subdivision, and it was specifically it was platted subdivision in Bishop Woods. And we got into a further discussion with that. They actually had a covenants and homeowners association, and they let it lapse out of existence. And because of our discussions, I think they're making a movement to put that back in, and I agree with Trustee Marks that platted subdivision may wish to define how big a house is and what the color is. For all of me, I don't care. They can do that through covenants, and they're legal to do so. But it was the Planning Commission's considered that if you eliminate platted subdivisions from tiny homes, you're now spot zoning, and that is an issue that's best taken care of by covenants within those platted subdivisions who can have those.
And those people have those, that's why they move there. That's what they want. Let me see what Roger says, Pete, please.
A couple of things which should not be construed as an opinion on what way the board should vote, one way or the other. This is only a first reading anyway. But a couple of things that were considered that perhaps need further legal clarification is your zoning ordinance, section 16.02, has always indicated that you may have more than one residential structure on a parcel. One of the things that immediately came to my mind, this has been back and forth to the Planning Commission a couple of times, at least before it came here, because I sent it there on some things that I thought were troublesome. One of the things, though, is when does that apply? When can you have more than one structure? Are we going to see, for example, a whole string of what I will characterize as 1940s little individual rental unit type of things that are all 50 feet apart from each other? That can't happen under the way the zoning ordinance is currently organized, because it says that even if you have multiple residential structures on one parcel, it has to have each area has to have the setback compliance and the minimum lot size compliance. So by means of example, if you have a 1.5 acre lot and the minimum lot size in your particular residential zoning district has a 1 acre minimum, then you're not going to be able to put 3 or even 2 tiny homes or any other kind of home on it because of that interlock with your other sections of the zoning ordinance. Because that was a concern that I had, and I basically sent it back with what's the intent of the Planning Commission, under what circumstances do you want that, and they retained that provision. Another thing that I just didn't know enough about, so I went to the county, in terms of the Planning Commission did insert criteria that it must comply with, that they have to come forth with a Marquette County building permit first, because there are a number of criteria. There is no minimum size per se under the county construction code or the building code. However, ours says it can't be more than 450 square feet, and at some point, if it gets too much smaller than that, it's not going to meet the construction codes and the building codes, because there's a minimum room size of 70 square feet per room, which is not a very big room, quite frankly, but there are minimum room sizes unless it's a bathroom or a laundry room. There is a mandatory requirement that there must be laundry hookups. There are mandatory requirements for egress from sleeping areas. So in other words, there has to be a hatch or a bedroom or something of that nature. So that's going to build more criteria in what can or cannot be included in a tiny home. By having that one sentence, or not even a sentence, a little phrase saying that you've got to come to us with a Marquette County building permit that's been approved first. So that will take care of some of these issues. Now another one, and I have to find exactly where it is in here. We changed, the Planning Commission changed in its recommendations in the definition of tiny home that any wheels and to the extent the steel undercarriage is not an integral structural component shall be removed and the unit shall be placed upon and properly affixed to a permanent or semi-permanent foundation, because again, that comes to the intent. Is the intent that that it's going to be a temporary type of thing that can easily be hauled in or out? Because I want to say that at least one of the earlier drafts said may, and this is changing the may to a shall, so it's contemplating a situation, for better or worse, again, no opinion on this, but just clarifying what is being discussed, is something of a more permanent nature that is going to be on a foundation. You can always, if it's small enough, you can always put it back on a truck if it arrived on a truck. But it's contemplating that it's going to be on a permanent or semi-permanent foundation on the draft that's been presented to you, because that was the topic of some considerable discussion at the Planning Commission level as well, in the same context as the travel trailers, that you don't want to necessarily, even if it's on a permanent foundation, you don't want a 1962 camper or travel trailer perched on a couple of concrete blocks and now call it a tiny home. That is not the intent of the ordinance, and I think that component of it is something that we spent some time on, just fine-tuning the language to rule out those possibilities. The whole concept is a political decision, not a legal decision, but I just wanted to point out that those are some legal issues that were addressed in the definitions and the application for what's been presented to you here on your first reading. And then a little bit off topic on that, but because it's been copied so many times, I just noticed that in the board version packet there are two typos. One of them is in section 15 of this version in the title. It says principal uses. It's the wrong principal. It should be P-A-L, not P-L-E at the end. And the other one is in section 16.12, subsection 1. It says, in addition to complying with or other relevant sections, the or shouldn't be there. It should be just with other relevant sections. And it is actually correct in other versions of this that have been disseminated. I think somebody just retyped this and made an error, 2 errors. But I point that out for.
Actually, Pete was, I've moved him off.
Quick, Jason, is there any areas that sort of have advanced and did this with mixed uses yet?
Not to my knowledge, not in this county.
Next time, on the public hearing, I'm glad I went to listen to this, the 2 meetings that you had, is that the concerns were 300 feet was a concern to a lot of people in subdivisions, because 300 feet they could own that, so nobody else is going to. And also a list of see if I could have property, I think you brought it up, I want, say 600 feet, I own 600 feet, I want to put all, tiny houses in there. They're afraid of that. On Big Bay, up on Eagle's Nest, I think there was a doctor up there wanted to put a tiny house on the lake, and I think that would fit in there too. But the other one was a container somebody talked to me about. Make them put siding on it if we're going to put it in your yard, just like a garage or anything like that. But the concern was the 300 feet, and also a list of the role of the tiny houses.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess in the spirit of moving this along a little bit, because it's almost 9:30, I would move to accept the recommended zoning text amendments as first reading.
I'll support.
Motion and support. Anything else? John?
You're accepting the package?
Yes.
All three?
Yep.
As a first reading? Just as a first reading? Okay.
Is this a typo on Article 16? In the printed thing, you have Article 1612, and then below you got Section 1612 tiny homes, but yeah, on the screen you had point 1613, which is correct?
I'm sorry, where are you looking at?
Right here. Screen had 16, 15.
Oh, right, it should be 3, yeah, I'll correct that.
16, 13.
Thank you.
Good eye.
Once in a while they work.
Okay, Dan, the motion on the floor is to accept this as a first reading on all three. All three items, the connectivity, the tiny homes, and the shipping containers, just as a first reading. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. If Isaac was here, he would pass this along, but we've had 6 inquiries since the public hearing about the construction of tiny homes and folks that are awaiting this potential zoning text amendment to move forward, and we've only received 1 negative comment in our planning office. So.
Are they all 6 in one subdivision, or?
No.
Okay.
Various properties, different ones.
Okay.
Right next
All
to
on the
me.
same lot. We're moving in next to John, sorry. All right, why? I haven't looked at my agenda in a while. All right, we did not have any items pulled from the consent agenda, so that's all right. And committee updates, and kind of fall, I told Dave that's where he would fall for his committees, and
Mine is real quick. The road committee meeting tonight, the only update would be that there's nothing to update. We're still waiting for direction from the planning commission, who has not met in the last month practically, with regard to the drainage district evaluation and recommendation. And other than that, we're still working on the road transportation facilities plan, and the asset management program development is, according to Isaac, is about 85% complete.
Which one is that?
The asset management program development for the roads, which is a integral part of deciding what maintenance needs to be done. That's it for roads. Planning Commission, once again, has not met for a couple meetings now. And that's it. Mike, if you want to update the rec committee, but I don't think there's a lot to update there either.
I think for the, yeah.
can't have a crowd and a presentation. Yeah, if you want to make a comment or something.
Short comment.
We are looking for a replacement for Dan Adamini. His job will not allow him to be able to work any further than, or be on the committee any further than May. So we would like somebody who is wants to be active. The rec committee is a very active committee. We're looking for somebody that wants to be part of that committee. I know I had a presentation. I always use those presentations to help me remember all this stuff. But you know, our grants. There's 3 grants that we have applied for that received total support of the board, and one of them is finished. That's from 2014. I was going to show you images. Actually 2 of them are finished, and they're both at the Schwemmwood. And next year, the passport grant that was awarded in 2015 will be at Lions Field, and that is to put in a walkway around Lions Field, and that will take place next year. Do you guys have any questions about it? You have the minutes in there, and Mr. Wiegand and I spent quite a bit of time. You can see that those minutes are quite long.
Is that walkway going to be gravel?
I believe it's going to be ash.
We are still in the process of determining cost.
Oh, okay.
And that was one of the reasons that pushed it until next year. It was supposed to have been done this year. We asked for an extension to get it to next year because the cost came in a little bit high. So we're still trying to work that out.
Any questions?
What was I going to say? Oh, we do have someone who's interested in the rec committee.
Thank you.
So
that's good news.
Yep, I was actually waiting for this to find out when to tell her to come to the next meeting. So
Okay.
now that I have that confirmed, I will get that to her.
Excellent. That'd be the 19th is our next meeting.
Okay. Good.
Mr. Wiegand, you were going to say something?
No, I just have this for you.
Oh.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. All right. Oh, Keith. Is either one of your you should have waved your hand. I had no idea that we were going to be as lengthy as we were. I appreciate that a lot. We do have in your mailboxes was an application for appointment from Keith. Is it Ferrara? Okay. For the Board of Review, and I've been harping about that committee for quite a while because we are one short, and with only having 2 or 3 people on a committee, it's tough to have a quorum then. So Randy Rattari got Keith to fill it out. I haven't had a chance to visit with him, but you can see he does have some nice experience. And I asked him if he wouldn't mind coming tonight to either answer questions or give us a little bit of history or whatever he wanted to share. Do you want to start by introducing yourself then?
Well, I am Keith Ferrara. My wife Catherine is sitting on the right. I lived in California most of my life and practiced for 13 years, 5 of them in Southern California in a very small law firm where I was the second lawyer. 8 years in San Francisco area by myself on my own farm. When the economy tanked, lost my business, had to shut it down, and we decided to move here because my wife's family lives here. And then after a short while, we bought a home. We live here in the township on Warner Street for the last few years. And Randy lives a couple doors down, so I got to know him quite well. And he said, yeah, we got a spot on the board of review. We could use your help. And I'm not doing anything legal in the area right now. I'm working at the casino because unfortunately that was the only place that would hire me when I first got here. Because I was an out-of-towner, I didn't know anybody, had no references around here, so they were the only place willing to give me a job. So that's where I am right now. But in the meantime, I'm looking for something a little more challenging because I could do every job in that business with half my brain turned off, to tell you the truth. It's a very easy place to work. I need something a little more challenging than that. I have a lot of experience. I've worked in a number of cases in many different areas. Not very much tax law because in California, you need to have a certificate to be a tax lawyer. And nobody wanted to get that because everybody loses against the government. So nobody wanted to do that business. So I don't have much experience in that. But I did do my own taxes. I still do them. I did my business's own taxes for 8 years. And I studied it quite a bit and had to take a few classes in school. And I don't think I'll have any much problem with it. I understand you need somebody, and I'm willing to get involved, and I want to help the community. And as far as how I might make my decisions, I'm not sure yet because I haven't read any of the local tax codes. But what I could tell you on one hand is even though you got a lot of budget problems, I don't think I'm just going to just hammer everybody to make sure you get lots of money. That's not going to happen. I'm going to be fair to everybody. Okay, but on the other hand, I do know that tax codes are pretty cut and dry. And if they say you got to pay, then you got to pay. And there's, in many ways, there's no way getting around it. There's very little discretion, but sometimes there is, and it just will take them one day.
And there are courses that you can take that are available occasionally, as well as a lot of documentation we can get for you. MTA has classes online that you can look at for, a lot of good information. Any questions for Keith?
Just by being here this long. I want to do it.
The wrong meeting to come to.
Well, we're glad you're here from California.
Yep, we appreciate it.
I just have one question. You think you ever be back to a meeting after tonight?
I don't know. It depends on my wife will let me sit through it with me.
They normally aren't this long.
No. And I really should have said, you know, were you in the audience? But I didn't really know we were going to go so lengthy. I didn't know about all the folks that were going to be here.
Oh, that's all right, you saved the best for last, right?
Yes, that's right. So I'm recommending Keith to the position. I would just look for some kind of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You are on.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
get some information to you. Great. Thank you, and
buy
thanks
a
again
shovel.
for waiting.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Buy
it.
a shovel. We like it up here, so I think you will too.
Okay. Any public comment? Please say no. I'm
Oh,
kidding.
come on.
I am kidding. Anything? Nope. Okay. Wrap up? Any announcements from anybody? That's great. Managers report?
Pretty short. It'll be short this time. Most of what we've been working on had to do with the public hearings that we had tonight. However, just an update on the Marquette Energy Center. You'd have a printed report. I have been communicating with Mr. Carpenter at the BLP. We have so far in hand 11 new reports back, nuisance reports with regard to the Marquette Energy Center. They have been advised of that. The understanding that we have is sometime next week, somebody either from Wartsala or from the Sound Study Group will be in town starting to work on potential resolutions around the 11th.
They're gonna run all 3 generators at that time?
I would suspect that they're going to put everything on. Yeah, the issue is when they have 2 to 3 of the generators running is when the issue is, and we'll make sure that that gets resolved.
Is there
Or
any
gets
chance that
tested.
the 11 people know that they're coming next week?
Yes, they do. They've been advised.
Okay,
They've
good.
been advised that that the folks will be in town and that there'll be some follow-up. Tom Carpenter's been pretty good about keeping in touch with them as well.
Any questions for the manager?
Will they come and tell us what they're going to do, try to do to eliminate it, Randy? Through you or?
I suspect they'll have a fairly strong invitation.
All right.
Yeah, I would expect that Tom Carpenter's going to make sure that there's a report back to us, and then he may even bring them, if they're still in town, bring them to the meeting on the 19th.
That would be good. Okay. Randy, the review of motions passed.
Okay, there were 5 motions this evening. The first motion was consent agenda. Second motion was approve the agenda as amended. The third motion was to approve the township meeting dates. Fourth motion was to approve the zoning text amendment first reading. The fifth motion was to appoint Keith to the Board of Review.
Thank you. Anything we need to have for January's agenda that anybody's aware of? We do have, I think I mentioned, a call in to Susan. She said that Friday would be a good time to talk to her. So I would like to line up all the months that we have available next month. I mean, besides budget and stuff, I'd like to try to do the first 6 months. I've got kind of a thought process that I'll bring to you maybe next meeting. How I'd like to see this, our year of attack, or whatever they call it, annual plan of work.
With regard to your annual plan of work, do you want my submittal for the meeting on the 19th, my policy interpretations, or do you want that for the first meeting in January?
I had put the budget process down from January because we had so many issues that we want to talk about, but that's totally fluid. If the board wants to, what are you thinking? Because remember, the other part of this, and for the public that doesn't know, policy governance that we adopted this year has a reporting process that comes into play from staff. So Randy's been working on that to have it ready for the first of the year.
My interpretation of the policies, interpretation of how we'll be applying them for our reporting comes to you for the end of the year. Question is, do you want it at your meeting on the 19th, or do you want to have it in your first meeting, January 2nd, to be your first meeting in January?
Thoughts, Dave?
I would like to see him as soon as he has them so that we have time to mull them over without the intention of taking any action on them on the 19th.
That sound all right?
That's fine.
Okay, by the 19th?
Sure.
Be great. We can always amend them. Okay.
Lynn?
Yes, sir.
Question from the manager. When our planners not go out of town for meetings, do they report to the, do they submit some kind of a report what happened? Like we have Jason and Zach went, Isaac went 2 different times. Do they report to the planning commission?
I believe they do a report to the planning commission. I believe they do. Report to the planning commission what they learned in the conference. You're talking about the Michigan conference, and
Right,
then there was
exactly.
the national conference.
2 of them, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I haven't seen any, that's all.
I'm not sure if those are written reports or if they do a verbal report.
Written,
They're
David?
normally verbal reports.
Oh, are they?
That'd be something good to put in the minutes, at least.
But they can be distilled down to a written report. I know the supervisors have asked the board members that go to the MTA conference to report back on what they picked up. So if the board would like those to, if the planning commission would like those to be written reports, we can certainly do that.
Just thought I'd bring it up.
Mhm.
What we're dealing with as far as planning and everything else, it'd be interesting to be, updated on that because.
That's one of the plans of attack, too, is going to be the planning department.
I think tonight you heard probably the 3 most talked about topics at their meetings, national and Michigan, which is all 3 of them are in process of change in the legislature right now again.
Besides marijuana.
But no matter what happens in the planning commission, they have to bring it back to the board.
Sure.
I think John, when his question, he was alluding to that.
One way or another, either through the planning commission or directly.
Right.
Okay. So then, board member comment, you're saying, Randy, before we go into closed session, right? You wanted to schedule that way. Anybody have anything to add or subtract? Maybe? Okay. All right.
Scared you, didn't I?
Then, yes, you did. At 9:46, we are going to look for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
For the purpose of 15.268.
Thank you for coming.
Subsection D, to consider the purchase of lease or purchase or lease of real property up to the time and option to purchase or lease that real property is obtained. So
Did we
who
have-
made that
did we have a
motion? Dan did. Who seconded that?
Dan and John.
John. Trustee Everson?
Yes.
Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is yes. And Supervisor Durant?
Yes.
Closed session
yeah.
at
Management.
9:47.
Yep.